Chapter 1 Marseille, the Arrival. On the 24th of February, 1815, the lookout at Notre Dame de la Garde signaled the three-master, the Pharaon from Smyrna, Trieste, and Naples. As usual, a pilot put off immediately, and rounding the Ch d'Odif, got on board the vessel between Cape Morgiou and Rion Island. Immediately, and according to custom, the ramparts of Fort Saint-Jean were covered with spectators. It is always an event at Marseille for a ship to come into port, especially when this ship, like the Pharaon, has been built, rigged, and laden at the old Fos docks, and belongs to an owner of the city. The ship drew on and had safely passed the strait, which some volcanic shock has made between the Calaserine and Jaros Islands, had doubled Pong, and approached the harbor under topsails, jib, and spanker, but so slowly and sedately that the idlers, with that instinct which is the forerunner of evil, asked one another what misfortune could have happened on board. However, those experienced in navigation saw plainly that if any accident had occurred, it was not to the vessel herself, for she bore down with all the evidence of being skillfully handled, the anchor a cockbill, the jib boom guys already eased off, and standing by the side of the pilot, who was steering the Pharaon towards the narrow entrance of the inner port, was a young man who, with activity and vigilant eye, watched every motion of the ship, and repeated each direction of the pilot. The vague disquietude which prevailed among the spectators had so much affected one of the crowd that he did not await the arrival of the vessel in harbor, but jumping into a small skiff, desired to be pulled alongside the Pharaon, which he reached as she rounded into La Arserve Basin. When the young man on board saw this person approach, he left his station by the pilot, and hat in hand, leaned over the ship's bulwarks. He was a fine, tall, slim young fellow of 18 or 20, with black eyes, and hair as dark as a raven's wing, and his whole appearance bespoke that calmness and resolution peculiar to men accustomed from their cradle to contend with danger. "Ah, is it you, Dance?" cried the man in the skiff. "What's the matter? And why have you such an air of sadness aboard?" "A great misfortune, Moral," replied the young man, "a great misfortune, for me especially. Off Civita Vecchia we lost our brave Captain Leclerc." "And the cargo?" inquired the owner, eagerly. "Is all safe, Moral, and I think you will be satisfied on that head. But poor Captain Leclerc, what happened to him?" asked the owner, with an air of considerable resignation. "What happened to the worthy captain? He died. Fell into the sea?" "No, sir, he died of brain fever in dreadful agony." Then turning to the crew, he said, "Bear a hand there, to take in sail." All hands obeyed, and at once the 8 or 10 seamen who composed the crew sprang to their respective stations at the spanker brails and outhaul, topsail sheets and halyards, the jib downhaul, and the topsail clewlines and buntlines. The young sailor gave a look to see that his orders were promptly and accurately obeyed, and then turned again to the owner. "And how did this misfortune occur?" inquired the latter, resuming the interrupted conversation. "Alas, sir, in the most unexpected manner. After a long talk with the harbor-master, Captain Leclerc left Naples greatly disturbed in mind. In 24 hours he was attacked by a fever, and died 3 days afterwards. We performed the usual burial service, and he is at his rest, sewn up in his hammock with a 36-pound shot at his head and his heels, off El Giglio Island. We bring to his widow his sword and cross of honor. It was worth while, truly," added the young man with a melancholy smile, "to make war against the English for 10 years, and to die in his bed at last, like everybody else." "Why, you see, Edmund," replied the owner, who appeared more comforted at every moment, "we are all mortal, and the old must make way for the young. If not, why, there would be no promotion. And since you assure me that the cargo is all safe and sound, Moral, take my word for it, and I advise you not to take 25 francs for the profits of the voyage." Then, as they were just passing the round tower, the young man shouted, "Stand by there to lower the topsails and jib, brail up the spanker." The order was executed as promptly as it would have been on board a man of war. "Let go, and clew up, At this last command all the sails were lowered, and the vessel moved almost imperceptibly onwards. "Now, if you will come on board, Moral," said Dance, observing the owner's impatience, "here is your supercargo, Danglars, coming out of his cabin, who will furnish you with every particular. As for me, I must look after the anchoring and dress the ship in mourning." The owner did not wait for a second invitation. He seized a rope which Dance flung to him, and with an activity that would have done credit to a sailor, climbed up the side of the ship, while the young man, going to his task, left the conversation to Danglars, who now came towards the owner. He was a man of 25 or 26 years of age, of unprepossessing countenance, obsequious to his superiors, insolent to his subordinates, and this, in addition to his position as responsible agent on board, which is always obnoxious to the sailors, made him as much disliked by the crew as Edmund Dance was beloved by them. "Well, Moral," said Danglars, "you have heard of the misfortune that has befallen us." "Yes, yes, poor Captain Leclerc. He was a brave and an honest man, and a first-rate seaman, one who had seen long and honorable service, as became a man charged with the interests of a house so important as that of Morel and Son," replied Danglars. "But," replied the owner, glancing after Dance, who was watching the anchoring of his vessel, "it seems to me that a sailor needs not be so old as you say, Danglars, to understand his business, for our friend Edmund seems to understand it thoroughly, and not to require instruction from anyone." "Yes," said Danglars, darting at Edmund a look gleaming with hate. "Yes, he is young, and youth is invariably self-confident." Scarcely was the captain's breath out of his body when he assumed the command without consulting anyone, and he caused us to lose a day and a half at the island of Elba, instead of making for Marseille direct. As to taking command of the vessel, replied Morel, that was his duty as captain's mate. As to losing a day and a half off the island of Elba, he was wrong, unless the vessel needed repairs. The vessel was in as good condition as I am, and as I hope you are, Moral, and this day and a half was lost from pure whim, for the pleasure of going ashore, and nothing else. "Dance," said the shipowner, turning towards the young man, "come this way." "In a moment, sir," answered Dance, "and I'm with you." Then, calling to the crew, he said, "Let go." The anchor was instantly dropped, and the chain ran rattling through the porthole. Dance continued at his post in spite of the presence of the pilot, until this maneuver was completed, and then he added, "Half-mast the colors, and square the yards." "You see," said Danglars, "he fancies himself captain already, upon my word." "And so, in fact, he is," said the owner. "Accept your signature and your partner's, Moral." "And why should he not have this?" asked the owner. "He is young, it is true, but he seems to me a thorough seaman, and of full experience." A cloud passed over Danglars' brow. "Your pardon, Moral," said Dance, approaching. "The vessel now rides at anchor, and I am at your service. You hailed me, I think?" Danglars retreated a step or two. "I wished to inquire why you stopped at the island of Elba." "I do not know, sir. It was to fulfill the last instructions of Captain Leclerc, who, when dying, gave me a packet for Marshal Bertrand." "Then did you see him, Edmund?" "Who? The Marshal?" "Yes." Morel looked around him, and then, drawing Dance on one side, he said suddenly, "And how is the Emperor?" "Very well, as far as I could judge from the sight of him." "You saw the Emperor, then?" "He entered the Marshal's apartment while I was there." "And you spoke to him?" "Why, it was he who spoke to me, sir," said Dance, with a smile. "And what did he say to you?" "Asked me questions about the vessel, the time she left Marseille, the course she had taken, and what was her cargo. I believe, if she had not been laden, and I had been her master, he would have bought her. But I told him I was only mate, and that she belonged to the firm of Morel and Son." "Ah, yes," he said, "I know them. The Morels have been shipowners from father to son, and there was a Morel who served in the same regiment with me when I was in garrison at Valence." "Part02. "And that is true," cried the owner, greatly delighted. "And that was Policar Morel, my uncle, who was afterwards a captain." Dance, you must tell my uncle that the emperor remembered him, and you will see it will bring tears into the old soldier's eyes. Come, come, continued he, patting Edmund's shoulder kindly, you did very right, Dance, to follow Captain Leclerc's instructions and touch at elbow, although if it were known that you had conveyed a packet to the marshal and had conversed with the emperor, it may bring you into trouble. How could that bring me into trouble, sir? Asked Dance, for I did not even know of what I was the bearer, and the emperor merely made such inquiries as he would of the first comer. But, pardon me, here are the health officers and the customs inspectors coming alongside. And the young man went to the gangway. As he departed, Danglars approached and said, well, it appears that he has given you satisfactory reasons for his landing at Portoferraggio? Yes, most satisfactory, my dear Danglars. Well, so much the better, said the supercargo, for it is not pleasant to think that a comrade has not done his duty. Dance has done his, replied the owner, and that is not saying much. It was Captain Leclerc who gave orders for this delay. Talking of Captain Leclerc, has not Dance given you a letter from him? To me? No. Was there one? I believe that, besides the packet, Captain Leclerc confided a letter to his care. Of what packet are you speaking, Danglars? Why, that which Dance left at Portoferraggio. How do you know he had a packet to leave at Portoferraggio? Danglars turned very red. I was passing close to the door of the captain's cabin, which was half open, and I saw him give the packet and letter to Dance. He did not speak to me of it, replied the shipowner, but if there be any letter he will give it to me. Danglars reflected for a moment. Then, Moral, I beg of you, said he, not to say a word to Dance on the subject. I may have been mistaken. At this moment the young man returned. Danglars withdrew. Well, my dear Dance, are you now free? Inquired the owner. Yes, sir. You have not been long detained. No, I gave the custom house officers a copy of our bill of lading, and as to the other papers, they sent a man off with the pilot, to whom I gave them. Then you have nothing more to do here? No, everything is all right now. Then you can come and dine with me. I really must ask you to excuse me. Moral, my first visit is due to my father, though I am not the less grateful for the honor you have done me. Right, Dance, quite right. I always knew you were a good son, and inquired Dance, with some hesitation, do you know how my father is? Well, I believe, my dear Edmund, though I have not seen him lately. Yes, he likes to keep himself shut up in his little room. That proves, at least, that he has wanted for nothing during your absence. Dance smiled. My father is proud, sir, and if he had not a meal left, I doubt if he would have asked anything from anyone, except from heaven. Well, then, after this first visit has been made we shall count on you. I must again excuse myself, Moral, for after this first visit has been paid I have another which I am most anxious to pay. True, Dance, I forgot that there was at the Catalans someone who expects you no less impatiently than your father, the lovely Mertz. Dance blushed. Ah, ha, said the shipowner, I am not in the least surprised, for she has been to me 3 times, inquiring if there were any news of the Pharaon. Peste! Edmund, you have a very handsome mistress. She is not my mistress, replied the young sailor, gravely, she is my betrothed. Sometimes one and the same thing, said Moral, with a smile. Not with us, sir, replied Dance. Well, well, my dear Edmund, continued the owner, don't let me detain you. You have managed my affairs so well that I ought to allow you all the time you require for your own. Do you want any money? No, sir. I have all my pay to take, nearly 3 months' wages. You are a careful fellow, Edmund. Say I have a poor father, sir. Yes, yes, I know how good a son you are, so now hasten away to see your father. I have a son too, and I should be very wroth with those who detained him from me after a 3 months' voyage. Then I have your leave, sir. Yes, if you have nothing more to say to me. Nothing. Captain Leclerc did not, before he died, give you a letter for me. He was unable to write, sir. But that reminds me that I must ask your leave of absence for some days. To get married? Yes, first, and then to go to Paris. Very good. Have what time you require, dance. It will take quite 6 weeks to unload the cargo, and we cannot get you ready for sea until 3 months after that. Only be back again in 3 months, for the Pharaon, added the owner, patting the young sailor on the back, cannot sail without her captain. Without her captain, cried Dance, his eyes sparkling with animation. Pray mind what you say, for you are touching on the most secret wishes of my heart. Is it really your intention to make me captain of the Pharaon? If I were sole owner, we'd shake hands on it now, my dear Dance, and call it settled. But I have a partner, and you know the Italian proverb, Kai ha compadno ha padron, he who has a partner has a master. But the thing is at least half done, as you have 1 out of 2 votes. Rely on me to procure you the other. I will do my best. Ah, Moral, exclaimed the young seaman, with tears in his eyes, and grasping the owner's hand. Moral, I thank you in the name of my father and of Mertz. That's all right, Edmund. There's a providence that watches over the deserving. Go to your father. Go and see Mertz, and afterwards come to me. Shall I row you ashore? No, thank you. I shall remain and look over the accounts with Danglars. Have you been satisfied with him this voyage? That is according to the sense you attach to the question, sir. Do you mean, is he a good comrade? No, for I think he never liked me since the day when I was silly enough, after a little quarrel we had, to propose to him to stop for 10 minutes at the island of Monte Cristo to settle the dispute, a proposition which I was wrong to suggest, and he quite right to refuse. If you mean as responsible agent when you ask me the question, I believe there is nothing to say against him, and that you will be content with the way in which he has performed his duty. But tell me, Dance, if you had command of the Pharaon, should you be glad to see Danglars remain? Captain or mate, Moral, I shall always have the greatest respect for those who possess the owner's confidence. That's right, Dance. I see you are a thoroughly good fellow, and will detain you no longer. Go, for I see how impatient you are. Then I have leave. Go, I tell you. May I have the use of your skiff? Certainly. Then, for the present, Moral, farewell, and 1,000 thanks. I hope soon to see you again, my dear Edmund. Good luck to you. The young sailor jumped into the skiff and sat down in the stern sheets, with the order that he be put ashore at La Canebyre. The 2 oarsmen bent to their work, and the little boat glided away as rapidly as possible in the mid of the 1,000 vessels, which choke up the narrow way which leads between the 2 rows of ships from the mouth of the harbor to the Quai d'Orleans. Chapter 2. Father and Son. We will leave Danglars struggling with the demon of hatred, and endeavoring to insinuate in the ear of the shipowner some evil suspicions against his comrade, and follow Dance, who, after having traversed La Canebyre, took the Rue de Noailles, and entering the small house on the left of the Allées de Meilhan, rapidly ascended 4 flights of a dark staircase, holding the baluster with one hand, while with the other he repressed the beatings of his heart, and paused before a half-open door, from which he could see the whole of a small room. This room was occupied by Dance's father. The news of the arrival of the Pharaon had not yet reached the old man, who, mounted on a chair, was amusing himself by training with trembling hand the nasturtiums and sprays of clematis that clambered over the trellis at his window. Suddenly, he felt an arm thrown around his body, and a well-known voice behind him exclaimed, "Father, dear father." The old man uttered a cry and turned round. Then, seeing his son, he fell into his arms, pale and trembling. "What ails you, my dearest father? Are you ill?" inquired the young man, much alarmed. No, my dear Edmund, my boy, my son, no, but I did not expect you, and joy, the surprise of seeing you so suddenly. Ah, I feel as if I were going to die. Come, cheer up, my dear father. It is I, really I. They say joy never hurts, and so I came to you without any warning. Come now, do smile, instead of looking at me so solemnly. Here I am back again, and we are going to be happy. Yes, my boy, so we will, replied the old man. But how shall we be happy? Shall you never leave me again? Come, tell me all the good fortune that has befallen you. God forgive me, said the young man, for rejoicing at happiness derived from the misery of others, but heaven knows, I did not seek this good fortune. It has happened, and I really cannot pretend to lament it. The good Captain Leckler is dead, father, and it is probable that, with the aid of M. Morel, I shall have his place. Do you understand, father? Only imagine me a captain at 20, with 100 louis pay, and a share in the profits. Is this not more than a poor sailor like me could have hoped for? Yes, my dear boy, replied the old man, it is very fortunate. Well, then, with the first money I touch, I mean you to have a small house, with a garden in which to plant clematis, nasturtiums, and honeysuckle. But what ails you, father? Are you not well? It is nothing, nothing. It will soon pass away. And as he said so, the old man's strength failed him, and he fell backwards. Come, come, said the young man, a glass of wine, father, will revive you. Where do you keep your wine? No, no, thanks. You need not look for it. I do not want it, said the old man. Yes, yes, father, tell me where it is, and he opened 2 or 3 cupboards. It is no use, said the old man. There is no wine. What, no wine? Said Dance, turning pale, and looking alternately at the hollow cheeks of the old man and the empty cupboards. What, no wine? Have you wanted money, father? I want nothing now that I have you, said the old man. Yet, stammered Dance, wiping the perspiration from his brow, yet I gave you 200 francs when I left, 3 months ago. Yes, yes, Edmund, that is true, but you forgot at that time a little debt to our neighbor, Cadros. He reminded me of it, telling me if I did not pay for you, he would be paid by M. Morel, and so, you see, lest he may do you an injury. Well, why, I paid him. But, cried Dance, it was 140 francs I owed Cadros. Yes, stammered the old man, and you paid him out of the 200 francs I left you? The old man nodded. So that you have lived for 3 months on 60 francs, muttered Edmund. You know how little I require, said the old man. Heaven pardon me, cried Edmund, falling on his knees before his father. What are you doing? You have wounded me to the heart. Never mind it, for I see you once more, said the old man. And now it's all over, everything is all right again. Yes, here I am, said the young man, with a promising future and a little money. Here, father, here, he said, take this, take it, and send for something immediately. And he emptied his pockets on the table, the contents consisting of a dozen gold pieces, 5 or 6 5-franc pieces, and some smaller coin. The countenance of old Dance brightened. Whom does this belong to? He inquired. To me, to you, to us. Take it. Buy some provisions. Be happy, and tomorrow we shall have more. Gently, gently, said the old man, with a smile, and by your leave I will use your purse moderately, for they would say, if they saw me buy too many things at a time, that I had been obliged to await your return, in order to be able to purchase them. Do as you please, but, first of all, pray have a servant, father. I will not have you left alone so long. I have some smuggled coffee and most capital tobacco, in a small chest in the hold, which you shall have tomorrow. But, hush, here comes somebody. It is Cadros, who has heard of your arrival, and no doubt comes to congratulate you on your fortunate return. Ah, lips that say one thing, while the heart thinks another, murmured Edmund. But, never mind, he is a neighbor who has done us a service on a time, so he's welcome. As Edmund paused, the black and bearded head of Cadros appeared at the door. He was a man of 25 or 6, and held a piece of cloth, which, being a tailor, he was about to make into a coat lining. What, is it you, Edmund, back again? Said he, with a broad Marseillaise accent and a grin that displayed his ivory-white teeth. Yes, as you see, neighbor Cadros, and ready to be agreeable to you in any and every way, replied Dance, but ill concealing his coldness under this cloak of civility. Thanks, thanks, but, fortunately, I do not want for anything, and it chances that at times there are others who have need of me. Dance made a gesture. I do not allude to you, my boy. No, no, I lent you money, and you returned it. That's like good neighbors, and we are quits. We are never quits with those who oblige us, was Dan's reply, for when we do not owe them money, we owe them gratitude. What's the use of mentioning that? What is done is done. Let us talk of your happy return, my boy. I had gone on the quay to match a piece of mulberry cloth when I met friend Danglars. You at Marseille? Yes, says he. I thought you were at Smyrna. I was, but am now back again. And where is the dear boy, our little Edmund? Why, with his father, no doubt, replied Danglars. And so I came, added Cadros, as fast as I could to have the pleasure of shaking hands with a friend. Worthy Cadros, said the old man, he is so much attached to us. Yes, to be sure I am. I love and esteem you, because honest folks are so rare. But it seems you have come back rich, my boy, continued the tailor, looking askance at the handful of gold and silver which Dan had thrown on the table. The young man remarked the greedy glance which shone in the dark eyes of his neighbor. He said, negligently, this money is not mine. I was expressing to my father my fears, that he had wanted many things in my absence, and to convince me he emptied his purse on the table. Come, father, added Dance, put this money back in your box, unless neighbor Cadros wants anything, and in that case it is at his service. No, my boy, no, said Cadros. I am not in any want. Thank God, my living is suited to my means. Keep your money, keep it, I say. One never has too much, but, at the same time, my boy, I am as much obliged by your offer as if I took advantage of it. It was offered with good will, said Dance. No doubt, my boy, no doubt. Well, you stand well with M. Moral, I hear, you insinuating dog, you. Moral has always been exceedingly kind to me, replied Dance. Then you were wrong to refuse to dine with him. What? Did you refuse to dine with him? Said old Dance. And did he invite you to dine? Yes, my dear father, replied Edmund, smiling at his father's astonishment at the excessive honor paid to his son. And why did you refuse, my son? Inquired the old man. That I may the sooner see you again, my dear father, replied the young man. I was most anxious to see you, but it must have vexed M. Moral, good, worthy man, said Cadros, and, when you are looking forward to be captain, it was wrong to annoy the owner. But I explained to him the cause of my refusal, replied Dance, and I hope he fully understood it. Yes, but to be captain one must do a little flattery to one's patrons. I hope to be captain without that, said Dance. So much the better, so much the better. Nothing will give greater pleasure to all your old friends, and I know one down there behind the St. Nicholas Citadel, who will not be sorry to hear it. Merkt, said the old man. Yes, my dear father, and with your permission, now I have seen you, and know you are well and have all you require, I will ask your consent to go and pay a visit to the Catalans. Go, my dear boy, said old Dance, and heaven bless you in your wife, as it has blessed me in my son. His wife, said Cadros. Why, how fast you go on, Father Dance. She is not his wife yet, as it seems to me. No, but according to all probability she soon will be, replied Edmund. Yes, said Cadros, but you were right to return as soon as possible, my boy. And why? Because Merktz is a very fine girl, and fine girls never lack followers. She particularly has them by dozens. Really, answered Edmund with a smile which had in it traces of slight uneasiness. Ah, yes, continued Cadros, and capital offers, too. But you know, you will be captain, and who could refuse you then? Meaning to say, replied Dance, with a smile which but ill concealed his trouble, that if I were not a captain. Said Cadros, shaking his head. Come, said the sailor, I have a better opinion than you of women in general, and of Merkt in particular, and I am certain that, captain or not, she will remain ever faithful to me. So much the better, said Cadros. When one is going to be married, there is nothing like implicit confidence, but never mind that, my boy. Go and announce your arrival, and let her know all your hopes and prospects. I will go directly, was Edmund's reply, and embracing his father and nodding to Kadros, he left the apartment. Kadros lingered for a moment, then taking leave of old Dance, he went downstairs to rejoin Danglars, who awaited him at the corner of the Rue Senac. "Well," said Danglars, "did you see him?" "I have just left him," answered Kadros. "Did he allude to his hope of being captain?" "He spoke of it as a thing already decided." "Truly," said Danglars, "he is in too much hurry, it appears to me. Why, it seems Morrel has promised him the thing, so that he is quite elated about it. Why, yes, he is actually insolent over the matter, has already offered me his patronage as if he were a grand personage, and proffered me a loan of money as though he were a banker." "Which you refused?" "Most assuredly, although I may easily have accepted it, for it was I who put into his hands the first silver he ever earned. But now Dance has no longer any occasion for assistance. He is about to become a captain." "Pooh," said Danglars, "he is not one yet." "Ma foi, it will be as well if he is not," answered Kadros, "for if he should be, there will be really no speaking to him." "If we choose," replied Danglars, "he will remain what he is, and perhaps become even less than he is." "What do you mean?" "Nothing, I was speaking to myself." "And is he still in love with the Catalane?" "Over head and ears, but, unless I am much mistaken, there will be a storm in that quarter." "Explain yourself." "Why should I? It is more important than you think, perhaps." "You do not like Dance." "I never like upstarts." "Then tell me all you know about the Catalane." "I know nothing for certain, only I have seen things which induce me to believe, as I told you, that the future captain will find some annoyance in the vicinity of the Ville's infirmaries." "What have you seen? Come, tell me." "Well, every time I have seen Merktz come into the city she has been accompanied by a tall, strapping, black-eyed Catalan with a red complexion, brown skin, and fierce air, whom she calls cousin." "Really? And you think this cousin pays her attentions?" "I only suppose so. What else can a strapping chap of 21 mean with a fine wench of 17? And you say that Dance has gone to the Catalans?" "He went before I came down." "Let us go the same way. We will stop at La Arserve, and we can drink a glass of La Malgue, whilst we wait for news." "Come along," said Kadros, "but you pay the score." "Of course," replied Danglars, and going quickly to the designated place, they called for a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Chapter 3. The Catalans. Beyond a bare, weather-worn wall, about 100 paces from the spot where the two friends sat looking and listening as they drank their wine, was the village of the Catalans. Long ago this mysterious colony quitted Spain and settled on the tongue of land on which it is to this day. From where it came no one knew, and it spoke an unknown tongue. One of its chiefs, who understood Provençal, begged the commune of Marseille to give them this bare and barren promontory, where, like the sailors of old, they had run their boats ashore. The request was granted, and 3 months afterwards, around the 12 or 15 small vessels which had brought these gypsies of the sea, a small village sprang up. This village, constructed in a singular and picturesque manner, half Moorish, half Spanish, still remains, and is inhabited by descendants of the first comers who speak the language of their fathers. For 3 or 4 centuries they have remained upon this small promontory, on which they had settled like a flight of seabirds, without mixing with the Marseillaise population, intermarrying, and preserving their original customs and the costume of their mother country as they have preserved its language. Our readers will follow us along the only street of this little village, and enter with us one of the houses, which is sunburned to the beautiful dead-leaf color peculiar to the buildings of the country, and within coated with whitewash, like a Spanish posada. A young and beautiful girl, with hair as black as jet, her eyes as velvety as the gazelle's, was leaning with her back against the wainscot, rubbing in her slender, delicately molded fingers a bunch of heath blossoms, the flowers of which she was picking off and strewing on the floor. Her arms, bare to the elbow, brown, and modelled after those of the Arlesian Venus, moved with a kind of restless impatience, and she tapped the earth with her arched and supple foot, so as to display the pure and full shape of her well-turned leg, in its red cotton, grey and blue clocked, stalking at 3 paces from her, seated in a chair which he balanced on 2 legs, leaning his elbow on an old worm-eaten table, was a tall young man of 20 or 22, who was looking at her with an air in which vexation and uneasiness were mingled. He questioned her with his eyes, but the firm and steady gaze of the young girl controlled his look. "You see, Mertz," said the young man, "here is Easter come round again. Tell me, is this the moment for a wedding? I have answered you 100 times, Fernand, and really you must be very stupid to ask me again. Well, repeat it, I beg of you, that I may at last believe it. Tell me for the 100th time that you refuse my love, which had your mother's sanction. Make me understand once for all that you are trifling with my happiness, that my life or death are nothing to you. Ah, to have dreamed for 10 years of being your husband, Mertz, and to lose that hope, which was the only stay of my existence. At least it was not I who ever encouraged you in that hope, Fernand," replied Mertz. "You cannot reproach me with the slightest coquetry. I have always said to you, I love you as a brother, but do not ask from me more than sisterly affection, for my heart is another's." "Is not this true, Fernand?" "Yes, that is very true, Mertz," replied the young man. "Yes, you have been cruelly frank with me. But do you forget that it is among the Catalans a sacred law to intermarry? You mistake, Fernand. It is not a law, but merely a custom, and, I pray of you, do not cite this custom in your favor. You are included in the conscription, Fernand, and are only at liberty on sufferance, liable at any moment to be called upon to take up arms. Once a soldier, what would you do with me, a poor orphan, forlorn, without fortune, with nothing but a half-ruined hut and a few ragged nets, the miserable inheritance left by my father to my mother, and by my mother to me? She has been dead a year, and you know, Fernand, I have subsisted almost entirely on public charity. Sometimes you pretend I am useful to you, and that is an excuse to share with me the produce of your fishing, and I accept it, Fernand, because you are the son of my father's brother, because we were brought up together, and still more because it would give you so much pain if I refuse. But I feel very deeply that this fish which I go and sell, and with the produce of which I buy the flax I spin, I feel very keenly, Fernand, that this is charity. And if it were, Mertz, poor and lone as you are, you suit me as well as the daughter of the first shipowner or the richest banker of Marseille. What do such as we desire but a good wife and careful housekeeper? And where can I look for these better than in you? Fernand, answered Mertz, shaking her head, a woman becomes a bad manager, and who shall say she will remain an honest woman when she loves another man better than her husband? Rest content with my friendship, for I say once more that is all I can promise, and I will promise no more than I can bestow. I understand, replied Fernand. You can endure your own wretchedness patiently, but you are afraid to share mine. Well, Mertz, beloved by you, I would tempt fortune, you would bring me good luck, and I should become rich. I could extend my occupation as a fisherman, may get a place as clerk in a warehouse, and become in time a dealer myself. You could do no such thing, Fernand. You are a soldier, and if you remain at the Catalans it is because there is no war. So remain a fisherman, and contented with my friendship, as I cannot give you more. Well, I will do better, Mertz. I will be a sailor. Instead of the costume of our fathers, which you despise, I will wear a varnished hat, a striped shirt, and a blue jacket, with an anchor on the buttons. Would not that dress please you? What do you mean? Asked Mertz, with an angry glance. What do you mean? I do not understand you. I mean, Mertz, that you are thus harsh and cruel with me, because you are expecting someone who is thus attired. But perhaps he whom you await is inconstant, or if he is not, the sea is so to him. Fernand, cried Mertz, I believed you were good-hearted, and I was mistaken. Fernand, you are wicked to call to your aid jealousy and the anger of God. Yes, I will not deny it. I do await, and I do love him of whom you speak, and, if he does not return, instead of accusing him of the inconstancy which you insinuate, I will tell you that he died loving me and me only. The young girl made a gesture of rage. I understand you, Fernand. You would be revenged on him because I do not love you. You would cross your Catalan knife with his dirk. What end would that answer? to lose you my friendship if he were conquered, and see that friendship changed into hate if you were victor. Believe me, to seek a quarrel with a man is a bad method of pleasing the woman who loves that man. No, Fernand, you will not thus give way to evil thoughts. Unable to have me for your wife, you will content yourself with having me for your friend and sister, and besides, she added, her eyes troubled and moistened with tears, wait, Fernand. You said just now that the sea was treacherous, and he has been gone 4 months, and during these 4 months there have been some terrible storms. Fernand made no reply, nor did he attempt to check the tears which flowed down the cheeks of Mertz, although for each of these tears he would have shed his heart's blood, but these tears flowed for another. He arose, paced a while up and down the hut, and then, suddenly stopping before Mertz, with his eyes glowing and his hands clenched, "Say, Mertz," he said, "once for all, is this your final determination?" "I love Edmund Dance," the young girl calmly replied, "and none but Edmund shall ever be my husband." "And you will always love him?" "As long as I live." Fernand let fall his head like a defeated man, heaved a sigh that was like a groan, and then suddenly looking her full in the face, with clenched teeth and expanded nostrils, said, "But if he is dead, if he is dead, I shall die too. If he has forgotten you." "Mertz!" called a joyous voice from without. "Mertz!" "Ah!" exclaimed the young girl, blushing with delight, and fairly leaping in excess of love. "You see he has not forgotten me, for here he is." And rushing towards the door, she opened it, saying, "Here, Edmund, here I am." Fernand, pale and trembling, drew back like a traveler at the sight of a serpent, and fell into a chair beside him. Edmund and Mertz were clasped in each other's arms. The burning Marseille sun, which shot into the room through the open door, covered them with a flood of light. At first they saw nothing around them. Their intense happiness isolated them from all the rest of the world, and they only spoke in broken words, which are the tokens of a joy so extreme that they seem rather the expression of sorrow. Suddenly Edmund saw the gloomy, pale, and threatening countenance of Fernand as it was defined in the shadow. By a movement for which he could scarcely account to himself, the young Catalan placed his hand on the knife at his belt. "Ah, your pardon," said Dance, frowning in his turn. "I did not perceive that there were 3 of us." Then, turning to Mertz, he inquired, "Who is this gentleman?" "One who will be your best friend, Dance, for he is my friend, my cousin, my brother. It is Fernand, the man whom, after you, Edmund, I love the best in the world. Do you not remember him?" "Yes," said Dance, and without relinquishing Mertz's hand clasped in one of his own, he extended the other to the Catalan with a cordial air. But Fernand, instead of responding to this amiable gesture, remained mute and trembling. Edmund then cast his eyes scrutinizingly at the agitated and embarrassed Mertz, and then again on the gloomy and menacing Fernand. This look told him all, and his anger waxed hot. "I did not know, when I came with such haste to you, that I was to meet an enemy here." "An enemy!" cried Mertz, with an angry look at her cousin. "An enemy in my house, do you say, Edmund? If I believed that, I would place my arm under yours and go with you to Marseille, leaving the house to return to it no more." Fernand's eye darted lightning. "And should any misfortune occur to you, dear Edmund," she continued with the same calmness which proved to Fernand that the young girl had read the very innermost depths of his sinister thought, "if misfortune should occur to you, I would ascend the highest point of the Cape de Morgiou and cast myself headlong from it." Fernand became deadly pale. "But you are deceived, Edmund," she continued. "You have no enemy here. There is no one but Fernand, my brother, who will grasp your hand as a devoted friend." And at these words the young girl fixed her imperious look on the Catalan, who, as if fascinated by it, came slowly towards Edmund and offered him his hand. His hatred, like a powerless though furious wave, was broken against the strong ascendancy which Mertz exercised over him. Scarcely, however, had he touched Edmund's hand when he felt he had done all he could do, and rushed hastily out of the house. "Oh," he exclaimed, running furiously and tearing his hair, "oh, who will deliver me from this man? Wretched, wretched that I am! Hallo, Catalan, "Hello, Fernand, where are you running to?" exclaimed a voice. The young man stopped suddenly, looked around him, and perceived Cadros sitting at table with Danglars, under an arbor. "Well," said Cadros, "why don't you come? Are you really in such a hurry that you have no time to pass the time of day with your friends, particularly when they have still a full bottle before them?" added Danglars. Fernand looked at them both with a stupefied air, but did not say a word. "He seems besotted," said Danglars, pushing Cadros with his knee. "Are we mistaken, and is Dance triumphant in spite of all we have believed?" "Why, we must inquire into that," was Cadros's reply, and turning towards the young man, said, "Well, Catalan, can't you make up your mind?" Fernand wiped away the perspiration steaming from his brow, and slowly entered the arbor, whose shade seemed to restore somewhat of calmness to his senses, and whose coolness somewhat of refreshment to his exhausted body. "Good day," said he. "You called me, didn't you?" And he fell, rather than sat down, on one of the seats which surrounded the table. "I called you because you were running like a madman, and I was afraid you would throw yourself into the sea," said Cadros, laughing. "Why, when a man has friends, they are not only to offer him a glass of wine, but, moreover, to prevent his swallowing 3 or 4 pints of water unnecessarily." Fernand gave a groan, which resembled a sob, and dropped his head into his hands, his elbows leaning on the table. "Well, Fernand, I must say," said Cadros, beginning the conversation, with that brutality of the common people in which curiosity destroys all diplomacy, "you look uncommonly like a rejected lover," and he burst into a hoarse laugh. "Bah!" said Danglars, "a lad of his make was not born to be unhappy in love." "You are laughing at him, Cadros." "No," he replied, "only hark how he sighs." "Come, come, Fernand," said Cadros, "hold up your head and answer us. It's not polite not to reply to friends who ask news of your health." "My health is well enough," said Fernand, clenching his hands without raising his head. "Ah, you see, Danglars," said Cadros, winking at his friend, "this is how it is. Fernand, whom you see here, is a good and brave Catalan, one of the best fishermen in Marseille, and he is in love with a very fine girl, named Mertz, but it appears, unfortunately, that the fine girl is in love with the mate of the Pharaon, and as the Pharaon arrived today, why, you understand." "No, I do not understand," said Danglars. "Poor Fernand has been dismissed," continued Cadros. "Well, and what then?" said Fernand, lifting up his head, and looking at Cadros like a man who looks for someone on whom to vent his anger. "Mertz is not accountable to any person, is she? Is she not free to love whomsoever she will?" "Oh, if you take it in that sense," said Cadros, "it is another thing. But I thought you were a Catalan, and they told me the Catalans were not men to allow themselves to be supplanted by a rival. It was evening told me that Fernand, especially, was terrible in his vengeance." Fernand smiled piteously. "A lover is never terrible," he said. "Poor fellow," remarked Danglars, affecting to pity the young man from the bottom of his heart. "Why, you see, he did not expect to see Dance return so suddenly. He thought he was dead, perhaps, or perhaps faithless. These things always come on us more severely when they come suddenly." "Ah, ma foi, under any circumstances," said Cadros, who drank as he spoke, and on whom the fumes of the wine began to take effect. "Under any circumstances Fernand is not the only person put out by the fortunate arrival of Dance, is he, Danglars?" "No, you are right, and I should say that would bring him ill luck." "Well, never mind," answered Cadros, pouring out a glass of wine for Fernand and filling his own for the 8th or 9th time, while Danglars had merely sipped his. "Never mind, in the meantime he marries Mertz, the lovely Mertz, at least he returns to do that." During this time Danglars fixed his piercing glance on the young man, on whose heart Cadros's words fell like molten lead. "And when is the wedding to be?" he asked. "Oh, it is not yet fixed," murmured Fernand. "No, but it will be," said Cadros, "as surely as Dance will be captain of the Pharaon, Danglars?" Danglars shuddered at this unexpected attack, and turned to Cadros, whose countenance he scrutinized, to try and detect whether the blow was premeditated. but he read nothing but envy in a countenance already rendered brutal and stupid by drunkenness. "Well," said he, filling the glasses, "let us drink to Captain Edmund Dance, husband of the beautiful Catalane." Cedros raised his glass to his mouth with unsteady hand and swallowed the contents at a gulp. Fernand dashed his on the ground. Stammered Cedros. "What do I see down there by the wall, in the direction of the Catalans? Look, Fernand, your eyes are better than mine. I believe I see double. You know wine is a deceiver. But I should say it was two lovers walking side by side and hand in hand. Heaven forgive me. They do not know that we can see them, and they are actually embracing." Danglars did not lose one pang that Fernand endured. "Do you know them, Fernand?" he said. "Yes," was the reply, in a low voice. "It is Edmund and Merkt." "Ah, see there, now," said Cedros, "and I did not recognize them. Hallo, Dance. Hello, lovely damsel, come this way, and let us know when the wedding is to be, for Fernand here is so obstinate he will not tell us." "Hold your tongue, will you?" said Danglars, pretending to restrain Cedros, who, with the tenacity of drunkards, leaned out of the arbor. "Try to stand upright, and let the lovers make love without interruption. See, look at Fernand, and follow his example. He is well behaved." Fernand, probably excited beyond bearing, pricked by Danglars, as the bull is by the bandoleros, was about to rush out, for he had risen from his seat, and seemed to be collecting himself to dash headlong upon his rival, when Merkt, smiling and graceful, lifted up her lovely head, and looked at them with her clear and bright eyes. At this Fernand recollected her threat of dying, if Edmund died, and dropped again heavily on his seat. Danglars looked at the two men, one after the other, the one brutalized by liquor, the other overwhelmed with love. "I shall get nothing from these fools," he muttered, "and I am very much afraid of being here between a drunkard and a coward. Here's an envious fellow making himself boozy on wine when he ought to be nursing his wrath. And here is a fool who sees the woman he loves stolen from under his nose and takes on like a big baby. Yet this Catalan has eyes that glisten like those of the vengeful Spaniards, Sicilians, and Calabrians, and the other has fists big enough to crush an ox at one blow. Unquestionably, Edmund's star is in the ascendant, and he will marry the splendid girl. He will be captain, too, and laugh at us all, unless," a sinister smile passed over Danglars' lips, "unless I take a hand in the affair," he added. "Hallo," continued Cedros, half rising, and with his fist on the table, "hallo, Edmund. Do you not see your friends, or are you too proud to speak to them?" "No, my dear fellow," replied Dance, "I am not proud, but I am happy, and happiness blinds, I think, more than pride." "Ah, very well, that's an explanation," said Cedros. "How do you do, Madame Dance?" Merkt courtesied gravely, and said, "That is not my name, and in my country it bodes ill fortune, they say, to call a young girl by the name of her betrothed before he becomes her husband. So call me Merkt, if you please." "We must excuse our worthy neighbor, Cedros," said Dance, "he is so easily mistaken." "So, then, the wedding is to take place immediately, Dance," said Danglars, bowing to the young couple. "As soon as possible, Danglars. Today all preliminaries will be arranged at my father's, and tomorrow, or next day at latest, the wedding festival here at La Arserve. My friends will be there, I hope. That is to say, you are invited, Danglars, and you, Cedros." "And Fernand," said Cedros with a chuckle. "Fernand, too, is invited." "My wife's brother is my brother," said Edmund, "and we, Merkt and I, should be very sorry if he were absent at such a time." Fernand opened his mouth to reply, but his voice died on his lips, and he could not utter a word. "Today the preliminaries, tomorrow or next day the ceremony. You are in a hurry, Captain." "Danglars," said Edmund, smiling, "I will say to you as Merkt said just now to Cedros, do not give me the title which does not belong to me. That may bring me bad luck." "Your pardon," replied Danglars. "I merely said you seemed in a hurry, and we have lots of time. The Pharaon cannot be under way again in less than 3 months. We are always in a hurry to be happy, Danglers, for when we have suffered a long time, we have great difficulty in believing in good fortune. But it is not selfishness alone that makes me thus in haste. I must go to Paris. Ah, really? To Paris? And will it be the first time you have ever been there? Dance. Yes. Have you business there? Not of my own. The last commission of poor Captain Leckler, you know to what I allude, Danglers. It is sacred. Besides, I shall only take the time to go and return. Yes, yes, I understand, said Danglars, and then in a low tone, he added, to Paris, no doubt to deliver the letter which the Grand Marshal gave him. Ah, this letter gives me an idea, a capital idea. Ah, Dance, my friend, you are not yet registered number 1 on board the good ship Pharaon. Then turning towards Edmund, who was walking away, a pleasant journey, he cried. Chapter 4 Conspiracy. Danglars followed Edmund and Merktz with his eyes until the two lovers disappeared behind one of the angles of Fort St. Nicholas. Then, turning round, he perceived Fernand, who had fallen, pale and trembling, into his chair, while Cedros stammered out the words of a drinking song. Well, my dear sir, said Danglars to Fernand, here is a marriage which does not appear to make everybody happy. It drives me to despair, said Fernand. Do you, then, love Merktz? I adore her. For as long as I have known her, always. And you sit there, tearing your hair, instead of seeking to remedy your condition. I did not think that was the way of your people. What would you have me do? Said Fernand. How do I know? Is it my affair? I am not in love with Mademoiselle Merktz, but for you, in the words of the gospel, seek and you shall find. I have found already. What? I would stab the man, but the woman told me that if any misfortune happened to her betrothed, she would kill herself. Pooh! Women say those things, but never do them. You do not know Merktz. What she threatens she will do. Idiot! Muttered Danglars. Whether she kill herself or not, what matter, provided Dance is not captain? Before Merktz should die, replied Fernand, with the accents of unshaken resolution, I would die myself. That's what I call love, said Cedros with a voice more tipsy than ever. That's love, or I don't know what love is. Come, said Danglars, you appear to me a good sort of fellow, and hang me, I should like to help you, but— Yes, said Cedros, but how? My dear fellow, replied Danglars, you are 3 parts drunk. Finish the bottle, and you will be completely so. Drink then, and do not meddle with what we are discussing, for that requires all one's wit and cool judgment. I, drunk, said Cedros. Well, that's a good one. I could drink 4 more such bottles. They are no bigger than Cologne flasks. Pre-Pamphile, more wine. And Cedros rattled his glass upon the table. You were saying, sir, said Fernand, awaiting with great anxiety the end of this interrupted remark. What was I saying? I forget. This drunken Cedros has made me lose the thread of my sentence. Drunk, if you like. So much the worse for those who fear wine, for it is because they have bad thoughts which they are afraid the liquor will extract from their hearts. And Cedros began to sing the 2 last lines of a song very popular at the time. Tous les méchants sont buveurs d'eau, c'est bien prouvé par le déluge. 1. You said, sir, you would like to help me, but— Yes, but I added, to help you it would be sufficient that Dance did not marry her you love, and the marriage may easily be thwarted, methinks, and yet Dance need not die. Death alone can separate them, remarked Fernand. You talk like a noodle, my friend, said Cedros, and here is Danglars, who is a wide-awake, clever, deep fellow, who will prove to you that you are wrong. Prove it, Danglars. I have answered for you. Say there is no need why Dance should die. It would, truly, be a pity he should. Dance is a good fellow. I like Dance. Dance, your health. Fernand rose impatiently. Let him run on, said Danglars, restraining the young man. Drunk as he is not much out in what he says. Absence severs as well as death. and if the walls of a prison were between Edmund and Mertz, they would be as effectually separated as if he lay under a tombstone. Yes, but one gets out of prison, said Cadros, who, with what sense was left him, listened eagerly to the conversation, and when one gets out and one's name is Edmund Dance, one seeks revenge. What matters that? Muttered Fernand. And why, I should like to know, persisted Cadros, should they put Dance in prison? He has neither robbed, nor killed, nor murdered. Hold your tongue, said Danglars. I won't hold my tongue, replied Cadros. I say I want to know why they should put Dance in prison. I like Dance, Dance, your health. And he swallowed another glass of wine. Danglars saw in the muddled look of the tailor the progress of his intoxication, and turning towards Fernand, said, Well, you understand there is no need to kill him. Certainly not, if, as you said just now, you have the means of having Dance arrested. Have you that means? It is to be found for the searching. But why should I meddle in the matter? It is no affair of mine. I know not why you meddle, said Fernand, seizing his arm. But this I know, you have some motive of personal hatred against Dance, for he who himself hates is never mistaken in the sentiments of others. Motives of hatred against Dance? None, on my word. I saw you were unhappy, and your unhappiness interested me. That's all. But since you believe I act for my own account, adieu, my dear friend. Get out of the affair as best you may. And Danglars rose as if he meant to depart. No, no, said Fernand, restraining him. Stay. It is of very little consequence to me at the end of the matter whether you have any angry feeling or not against Dance. I hate him. I confess it openly. Do you find the means? I will execute it, provided it is not to kill the man, for Mertz has declared she will kill herself if Dance is killed. Cadros, who had let his head drop on the table, now raised it, and looking at Fernand with his dull and fishy eyes, he said, Kill Dance. Who talks of killing Dance? I won't have him killed. I won't. He's my friend, and this morning offered to share his money with me, as I shared mine with him. I won't have Dance killed. I won't. And who has said a word about killing him? Muddlehead, replied Danglars. We were merely joking. Drink to his health, he added, filling Cadros's glass, and do not interfere with us. Yes, yes, Dance good health, said Cadros, emptying his glass. Here's to his health. His health, hurrah! But the means, said Fernand. Have you not hit upon any? Asked Danglars. No, you undertook to do so. True, replied Danglars. The French have the superiority over the Spaniards, but the Spaniards ruminate, while the French invent. Do you invent, then? Said Fernand impatiently. Waiter, said Danglars, pen, ink, and paper. Pen, ink, and paper, muttered Fernand. Yes, I am a supercargo. Pen, ink, and paper are my tools, and without my tools I am fit for nothing. Pen, ink, and paper, then, called Fernand loudly. There's what you want on that table, said the waiter. Bring them here. The waiter did as he was desired. When one thinks, said Cadros, letting his hand drop on the paper, there is here wherewithal to kill a man more sure than if we waited at the corner of a wood to assassinate him. I have always had more dread of a pen, a bottle of ink, and a sheet of paper, than of a sword or pistol. The fellow is not so drunk as he appears to be, said Danglars. Give him some more wine, Fernand. Fernand filled Cadros's glass, who, like the confirmed toper he was, lifted his hand from the paper and seized the glass. The Catalan watched him until Cadros, almost overcome by this fresh assault on his senses, rested, or rather dropped, his glass upon the table. Well, resumed the Catalan, as he saw the final glimmer of Cadros's reason vanishing before the last glass of wine. Well, then, I should say, for instance, resumed Danglars, that if after a voyage such as Dance has just made, in which he touched at the island of Elba, someone were to denounce him to the king's procureur as a Bonapartist agent, I will denounce him, exclaimed the young man hastily. Yes, but they will make you then sign your declaration, and confront you with him you have denounced. I will supply you with the means of supporting your accusation, for I know the fact well. But Dance cannot remain forever in prison, and one day or other he will leave it, and the day when he comes out, woe betide him who was the cause of his incarceration. Oh, I should wish nothing better than that he would come and seek a quarrel with me. Yes, and Merktz, who will detest you if you have only the misfortune to scratch the skin of her dearly beloved Edmund. True, said Fernand. No, no, continued Danglars. If we resolve on such a step, it would be much better to take, as I now do, this pen, dip it into this ink, and write with the left hand that the writing may not be recognized the denunciation we propose. And Danglars, uniting practice with theory, wrote with his left hand, and in a writing reversed from his usual style, and totally unlike it, the following lines, which he handed to Fernand, and which Fernand read in an undertone. The Honorable, the King's Attorney, is informed by a friend of the throne and religion that when Edmund Dance, mate of the ship Pharaon, arrived this morning from Smyrna, after having touched at Naples and Porto Ferrajo, has been entrusted by Murat with a letter for the usurper, and by the usurper with a letter for the Bonapartist Committee in Paris. Proof of this crime will be found on arresting him, for the letter will be found upon him, or at his father's, or in his cabin on board the Pharaon. Very good, resumed Danglars. Now your revenge looks like common sense, for in no way can it revert to yourself, and the matter will thus work its own way. There is nothing to do now but fold the letter as I am doing, and write upon it, to the King's Attorney, and that's all settled. And Danglars wrote the address as he spoke. Yes, and that's all settled, exclaimed Cadros, who, by a last effort of intellect, had followed the reading of the letter, and instinctively comprehended all the misery which such a denunciation must entail. Yes, and that's all settled, only it will be an infamous shame, and he stretched out his hand to reach the letter. Yes, said Danglars, taking it from beyond his reach, and as what I say and do is merely in jest, and I, amongst the first and foremost, should be sorry if anything happened to Dance, the worthy Dance. Look here. And taking the letter, he squeezed it up in his hands and threw it into a corner of the arbor. All right, said Cadros. Dance is my friend, and I won't have him ill-used. And who thinks of using him ill? Certainly neither I nor Fernand, said Danglars, rising and looking at the young man, who still remained seated, but whose eye was fixed on the denunciatory sheet of paper flung into the corner. In this case, replied Cadros, let's have some more wine. I wish to drink to the health of Edmund and the lovely Merktz. You have had too much already, drunkard, said Danglars, and if you continue, you will be compelled to sleep here, because unable to stand on your legs. I, said Cadros, rising with all the offended dignity of a drunken man, I can't keep on my legs. Why, I'll wager I can go up into the belfry of the Accoules, and without staggering, too. Done, said Danglars, I'll take your bet, but today it is time to return. Give me your arm, and let us go. Very well, let us go, said Cadros, but I don't want your arm at all. Come, Fernand, won't you return to Marseille with us? No, said Fernand, I shall return to the Catalans. You're wrong. Come with us to Marseille. Come along. I will not. What do you mean? You will not. Well, just as you like, my prince. There's liberty for all the world. Come along, Danglars, and let the young gentleman return to the Catalans if he chooses. Danglars took advantage of Cadros's temper at the moment to take him off towards Marseille by the Porte Saint-Victor, staggering as he went. When they had advanced about 20 yards, Danglars looked back and saw Fernand stoop, pick up the crumpled paper, and putting it into his pocket then rush out of the arbor towards Pilon. Well, said Cadros, why, what a lie he told. He said he was going to the Catalans, and he is going to the city. Hello, Fernand. Chapter 5. The Marriage Feast. The morning sun rose clear and resplendent, touching the foamy waves into a network of ruby-tinted light. The feast had been made ready on the second floor at La Arserve, with whose arbor the reader is already familiar. The apartment destined for the purpose was spacious, and lighted by a number of windows, over each of which was written in golden letters for some inexplicable reason the name of one of the principal cities of France. Beneath these windows a wooden balcony extended the entire length of the house. And although the entertainment was fixed for 12 o'clock, an hour previous to that time the balcony was filled with impatient and expectant guests, consisting of the favored part of the crew of the Pharaon and other personal friends of the bridegroom, the whole of whom had arrayed themselves in their choicest costumes, in order to do greater honor to the occasion. Various rumors were afloat to the effect that the owners of the Pharaon had promised to attend the nuptial feast, but all seemed unanimous in doubting that an act of such rare and exceeding condescension could possibly be intended. Danglars, however, who now made his appearance accompanied by Cadros, effectually confirmed the report, stating that he had recently conversed with M. Morrel, who had himself assured him of his intention to dine at La Arcerf. In fact, a moment later M. Morrel appeared and was saluted with an enthusiastic burst of applause from the crew of the Pharaon, who hailed the visit of the shipowner as a sure indication that the man whose wedding feast he thus delighted to honor would before long be first in command of the ship, and as dance was universally beloved on board his vessel, the sailors put no restraint on their tumultuous joy at finding that the opinion and choice of their superiors so exactly coincided with their own. With the entrance of M. Morrel, Danglars and Cadros were dispatched in search of the bridegroom to convey to him the intelligence of the arrival of the important personage whose coming had created such a lively sensation, and to beseech him to make haste. Danglars and Cadros set off upon their errand at full speed, but before they had gone many steps they perceived a group advancing towards them, composed of the betrothed pair, a party of young girls in attendance on the bride, by whose side walked Dan's father, the whole brought up by Fernand, whose lips wore their usual sinister smile. Neither Merktz nor Edmond observed the strange expression of his countenance. They were so happy that they were conscious only of the sunshine and the presence of each other. Having acquitted themselves of their errand, and exchanged a hearty shake of the hand with Edmond, Danglars and Cadros took their places beside Fernand and old Dance, the latter of whom attracted universal notice. The old man was attired in a suit of glistening watered silk, trimmed with steel buttons, beautifully cut and polished. His thin but wiry legs were arrayed in a pair of richly embroidered clocked stockings, evidently of English manufacture, while from his three-cornered hat depended a long streaming knot of white and blue ribbons. Thus he came along, supporting himself on a curiously carved stick, his aged countenance lit up with happiness, looking for all the world like one of the aged dandies of 1796, parading the newly opened gardens of the Luxembourg and Tuileries. Beside him glided Cadros, whose desire to partake of the good things provided for the wedding party had induced him to become reconciled to the dance, father and son, although there still lingered in his mind a faint and imperfect recollection of the events of the preceding night, just as the brain retains on waking in the morning the dim and misty outline of a dream. As Danglars approached the disappointed lover, he cast on him a look of deep meaning, while Fernand, as he slowly paced behind the happy pair, who seemed, in their own unmixed content, to have entirely forgotten that such a being as himself existed, was pale and abstracted. Occasionally, however, a deep flush would overspread his countenance, and a nervous contraction distort his features, while, with an agitated and restless gaze, he would glance in the direction of Marseille, like one who either anticipated or foresaw some great and important event. Dance himself was simply, but becomingly, clad in the dress peculiar to the merchant service, a costume somewhat between a military and a civil garb, and with his fine countenance, radiant with joy and happiness, a more perfect specimen of manly beauty could scarcely be imagined. Lovely as the Greek girls of Cyprus or Chios, Merktz boasted the same bright flashing eyes of jet and ripe, round, coral lips. She moved with the light, free step of an Arlesian or an Andalusian. One more practiced in the arts of great cities would have hid her blushes beneath the veil, or, at least, have cast down her thickly fringed lashes, so as to have concealed the liquid luster of her animated eyes, but, on the contrary, the delighted girl looked around her with a smile that seemed to say, "If you are my friends, rejoice with me, for I am very happy." As soon as the bridal party came in sight of La Arcerf, M. Morel descended and came forth to meet it, followed by the soldiers and sailors there assembled, to whom he had repeated the promise already given, that Dance should be the successor to the late Captain Leclerc. Edmund, at the approach of his patron, respectfully placed the arm of his affianced bride within that of Morel, who, immediately conducting her up the flight of wooden steps leading to the chamber in which the feast was prepared, was gaily followed by the guests, beneath whose heavy tread the slight structure creaked and groaned for the space of several minutes. "Father," said Mertz, stopping when she had reached the center of the table, "sit, I pray you, on my right hand. On my left I will place him who has ever been as a brother to me," pointing with a soft and gentle smile to Fernand. But her words and look seemed to inflict the direst torture on him, for his lips became ghastly pale, and even beneath the dark hue of his complexion the blood may be seen retreating as though some sudden pang drove it back to the heart. During this time, Dance, at the opposite side of the table, had been occupied in similarly placing his most honored guests. Morel was seated at his right hand, Danglars at his left, while, at a sign from Edmund, the rest of the company ranged themselves as they found it most agreeable. Then they began to pass around the dusky, piquant Arlesian sausages and lobsters in their dazzling red cuirasses, prawns of large size and brilliant color, the echinus with its prickly outside and dainty morsel within, the clovis, esteemed by the epicures of the south as more than rivaling the exquisite flavor of the oyster, north. All the delicacies, in fact, that are cast up by the wash of waters on the sandy beach and styled by the grateful fishermen fruits of the sea. "A pretty silence, truly," said the old father of the bridegroom, as he carried to his lips a glass of wine of the hue and brightness of the topaz, and which had just been placed before Mertz herself. Now, would anybody think that this room contained a happy, merry party, who desire nothing better than to laugh and dance the hours away? "Ah," sighed Cadros, "a man cannot always feel happy because he is about to be married." "The truth is," replied Dance, "that I am too happy for noisy mirth. If that is what you meant by your observation, my worthy friend, you are right. Joy takes a strange effect at times. It seems to oppress us almost the same as sorrow." Danglars looked towards Fernand, whose excitable nature received and betrayed each fresh impression. "Why, what ails you?" asked he of Edmund. "Do you fear any approaching evil? I should say that you were the happiest man alive at this instant." "And that is the very thing that alarms me," returned Dance. "Man does not appear to me to be intended to enjoy felicity so unmixed. Happiness is like the enchanted palaces we read of in our childhood, where fiery dragons defend the entrance and approach, and monsters of all shapes and kinds requiring to be overcome before victory is ours. I own that I am lost in wonder to find myself promoted to an honor of which I feel myself unworthy, that of being the husband of Mertz." "No, no," cried Cadros, smiling, "you have not attained that honor yet. Mertz is not yet your wife. Just assume the tone and manner of a husband, and see how she will remind you that your hour is not yet come." The bride blushed, while Fernand, restless and uneasy, seemed to start at every fresh sound and from time to time wiped away the large drops of perspiration that gathered on his brow. "Well, never mind that, neighbor Cadros. It is not worthwhile to contradict me for such a trifle as that. It is true that Mertz is not actually my wife, but," added he, drawing out his watch, "in an hour and a half she will be." A general exclamation of surprise ran round the table, with the exception of the elder Dance, whose laugh displayed the still perfect beauty of his large white teeth. Mertz looked pleased and gratified, while Fernand grasped the handle of his knife with a convulsive clutch. "In an hour?" inquired Danglars, turning pale. "How is that, my friend?" "Why, thus it is," replied Dance. "Thanks to the influence of Morel, to whom, next to my father, I owe every blessing I enjoy, every difficulty has been removed. We have purchased permission to waive the usual delay, and at 2:30 the mayor of Marseille will be waiting for us at the city hall. Now, as 1:15 has already struck, I do not consider I have asserted too much in saying that, in another hour and 30 minutes Mertz will have become Madame Dance. Fernand closed his eyes, a burning sensation passed across his brow, and he was compelled to support himself by the table to prevent his falling from his chair. But in spite of all his efforts, he could not refrain from uttering a deep groan, which, however, was lost amid the noisy felicitations of the company. "Upon my word," cried the old man, "you make short work of this kind of affair. Arrived here only yesterday morning, and married today at 3 o'clock. Commend me to a sailor for going the quick way to work." "But," asked Danglars in a timid tone, "how did you manage about the other formalities, the contract, the settlement?" "The contract," answered Dance, laughingly. "It didn't take long to fix that. Mertz has no fortune. I have none to settle on her. So, you see, our papers were quickly written out, and certainly do not come very expensive." This joke elicited a fresh burst of applause, so that what we presumed to be merely the betrothal feast turns out to be the actual wedding dinner, said Danglars. "No, no," answered Dance, "don't imagine I am going to put you off in that shabby manner. Tomorrow morning I start for Paris. 4 days to go and the same to return, with 1 day to discharge the commission entrusted to me, is all the time I shall be absent. I shall be back here by the 1st of March, and on the 2nd I give my real marriage feast." This prospect of fresh festivity redoubled the hilarity of the guests to such a degree that the elder Dance, who, at the commencement of the repast, had commented upon the silence that prevailed, now found it difficult, amid the general din of voices, to obtain a moment's tranquillity in which to drink to the health and prosperity of the bride and bridegroom. Dance, perceiving the affectionate eagerness of his father, responded by a look of grateful pleasure, while Mertz glanced at the clock and made an expressive gesture to Edmund. Around the table reigned that noisy hilarity which usually prevails at such a time among people sufficiently free from the demands of social position not to feel the trammels of etiquette. Such as at the commencement of the repast had not been able to seat themselves according to their inclination rose unceremoniously, and sought out more agreeable companions. Everybody talked at once, without waiting for a reply, and each one seemed to be contented with expressing his or her own thoughts. Fernand's paleness appeared to have communicated itself to Danglars. As for Fernand himself, he seemed to be enduring the tortures of the damned. Unable to rest, he was among the first to quit the table, and, as though seeking to avoid the hilarious mirth that rose in such deafening sounds, he continued, in utter silence, to pace the farther end of the salon. Caedros approached him just as Danglars, whom Fernand seemed most anxious to avoid, had joined him in a corner of the room. "Upon my word," said Caedros, from whose mind the friendly treatment of Dance, united with the effect of the excellent wine he had partaken of, had effaced every feeling of envy or jealousy at Dance's good fortune. "Upon my word, Dance is a downright good fellow, and when I see him sitting there beside his pretty wife that is so soon to be, I cannot help thinking it would have been a great pity to have served him that trick you were planning yesterday." "Oh, there was no harm meant," answered Danglars. "At first I certainly did feel somewhat uneasy as to what Fernand may be tempted to do, but when I saw how completely he had mastered his feelings, even so far as to become one of his rival's attendants, I knew there was no further cause for apprehension." Caedros looked full at Fernand. He was ghastly pale. "Certainly," continued Danglars, "the sacrifice was no trifling one when the beauty of the bride is concerned. Upon my soul, that future captain of mine is a lucky dog. Gad, I only wish he would let me take his place." "Shall we not set forth?" asked the sweet, silvery voice of Mertz. 2 o'clock has just struck, and you know we are expected in a quarter of an hour." To be sure," cried Dance, eagerly quitting the table. "Let us go directly." His words were re-echoed by the whole party, with vociferous cheers. At this moment Danglars, who had been incessantly observing every change in Fernand's look and manner, saw him stagger and fall back, with an almost convulsive spasm, against a seat placed near one of the open windows. At the same instant his ear caught a sort of indistinct sound on the stairs, followed by the measured tread of soldiery, with the clanking of swords and military accoutrements. Then came a hum and buzz as of many voices. so as to deaden evening the noisy mirth of the bridal party, among whom a vague feeling of curiosity and apprehension quelled every disposition to talk, and almost instantaneously the most deathlike stillness prevailed. The sounds drew nearer. 3 blows were struck upon the panel of the door. The company looked at each other in consternation. "I demand admittance," said a loud voice outside the room, "in the name of the law." As no attempt was made to prevent it, the door was opened and a magistrate, wearing his official scarf, presented himself, followed by 4 soldiers and a corporal. Uneasiness now yielded to the most extreme dread on the part of those present. "May I venture to inquire the reason of this unexpected visit?" said M. Morel, addressing the magistrate, whom he evidently knew. "There is doubtless some mistake easily explained." "If it be so," replied the magistrate, "rely upon every reparation being made. Meanwhile, I am the bearer of an order of arrest, and although I most reluctantly perform the task assigned me, it must, nevertheless, be fulfilled." Who among the persons here assembled answers to the name of Edmund Dance? Every eye was turned towards the young man who, spite of the agitation he could not but feel, advanced with dignity and said, in a firm voice, "I am he. What is your pleasure with me?" "Edmund Dance," replied the magistrate, "I arrest you in the name of the law." "Me," repeated Edmund, slightly changing color, "and therefore, I pray?" "I cannot inform you, but you will be duly acquainted with the reasons that have rendered such a step necessary at the preliminary examination." M. Morel felt that further resistance or remonstrance was useless. He saw before him an officer delegated to enforce the law, and perfectly well knew that it would be as unavailing to seek pity from a magistrate decked with his official scarf as to address a petition to some cold marble effigy. Old Dance, however, sprang forward. "There are situations which the heart of a father or a mother cannot be made to understand." He prayed and supplicated in terms so moving. That evening the officer was touched, and, although firm in his duty, he kindly said, "My worthy friend, let me beg of you to calm your apprehensions. Your son has probably neglected some prescribed form or attention in registering his cargo, and it is more than probable he will be set at liberty directly he has given the information required, whether touching the health of his crew or the value of his freight." "What is the meaning of all this?" inquired Cadros, frowningly, of Danglars, who had assumed an air of utter surprise. "How can I tell you?" replied he. "I am, like yourself, utterly bewildered at all that is going on, and cannot in the least make out what it is about." Cadros then looked around for Fernand, but he had disappeared. The scene of the previous night now came back to his mind with startling clearness. The painful catastrophe he had just witnessed appeared effectually to have rent away the veil which the intoxication of the evening before had raised between himself and his memory. So, said he, in a hoarse and choking voice, to Danglars, "this, then, I suppose, is a part of the trick you were concerting yesterday?" "All I can say is that if it be so, it is an ill turn, and well deserves to bring double evil on those who have projected it." "Nonsense," returned Danglars. "I tell you again I have nothing whatever to do with it. Besides, you know very well that I tore the paper to pieces." "No, you did not," answered Cadros. "You merely threw it by. I saw it lying in a corner." "Hold your tongue, you fool. What should you know about it?" "Why, you were drunk." "Where is Fernand?" inquired Cadros. "How do I know?" replied Danglars, gone, as every prudent man ought to be, to look after his own affairs, most likely. "Never mind where he is. Let you and I go and see what is to be done for our poor friends." During this conversation, Dance, after having exchanged a cheerful shake of the hand with all his sympathizing friends, had surrendered himself to the officer sent to arrest him, merely saying, "Make yourselves quite easy, my good fellows. There is some little mistake to clear up. That's all, depend upon it, and very likely I may not have to go so far as the prison to effect that." "Oh, to be sure," responded Danglars, who had now approached the group. "Nothing more than a mistake, I feel quite certain." Dance descended the staircase, preceded by the magistrate and followed by the soldiers. A carriage awaited him at the door. He got in, followed by 2 soldiers and the magistrate, and the vehicle drove off towards Marseilles. Adieu, adieu, dearest Edmund, cried Mertz, stretching out her arms to him from the balcony. The prisoner heard the cry, which sounded like the sob of a broken heart, and leaning from the coach he called out, "Goodbye, Mertz, we shall soon meet again." Then the vehicle disappeared round one of the turnings of Fort St. Nicholas. "Wait for me here, all of you," cried M. Moral. "I will take the first conveyance I find, and hurry to Marseille, from where I will bring you word how all is going on." "That's right," exclaimed a multitude of voices. "Go, and return as quickly as you can." This second departure was followed by a long and fearful state of terrified silence on the part of those who were left behind. The old father and Mertz remained for some time apart, each absorbed in grief. But at length the two poor victims of the same blow raised their eyes, and with a simultaneous burst of feeling rushed into each other's arms. Meanwhile Fernand made his appearance, poured out for himself a glass of water with a trembling hand, then hastily swallowing it, went to sit down at the first vacant place, and this was, by mere chance, placed next to the seat on which poor Mertz had fallen half fainting, when released from the warm and affectionate embrace of old Dance. Instinctively Fernand drew back his chair. "He is the cause of all this misery, I am quite sure of it," whispered Cadros, who had never taken his eyes off Fernand, to Danglars. "I don't think so," answered the other. "He's too stupid to imagine such a scheme. I only hope the mischief will fall upon the head of whoever wrought it." "You don't mention those who aided and abetted the deed," said Cadros. "Surely," answered Danglars, "one cannot be held responsible for every chance arrow shot into the air." "You can, truly, when the arrow lights point downward on somebody's head." Meantime the subject of the arrest was being canvassed in every different form. "What think you, Danglars," said one of the party, turning towards him, "of this event?" "Why," replied he, "I think it just possible Dance may have been detected with some trifling article on board ship considered here as contraband." "But how could he have done so without your knowledge, Danglars, since you are the ship's supercargo?" "Why, as for that, I could only know what I was told respecting the merchandise with which the vessel was laden. I know she was loaded with cotton, and that she took in her freight at Alexandria from Pastrit's warehouse, and at Smyrna from Pascal's. That is all I was obliged to know, and I beg I may not be asked for any further particulars." "Now I recollect," said the afflicted old father. "My poor boy told me yesterday he had got a small case of coffee, and another of tobacco for me." "There, you see," exclaimed Danglars. "Now the mischief is out. Depend upon it the custom-house people went rummaging about the ship in our absence and discovered poor Dan's hidden treasures." Mertz, however, paid no heed to this explanation of her lover's arrest. Her grief, which she had hitherto tried to restrain, now burst out in a violent fit of hysterical sobbing. "Come, come," said the old man, "be comforted, my poor child. There is still hope." "Hope," repeated Danglars. "Hope," faintly murmured Fernand, but the words seemed to die away on his pale agitated lips, and a convulsive spasm passed over his countenance. Good news," shouted forth one of the party stationed in the balcony on the lookout. "Here comes M. Morel back. No doubt, now, we shall hear that our friend is released." Mertz and the old man rushed to meet the shipowner and greeted him at the door. He was very pale. "What news?" exclaimed a general burst of voices. "Alas, my friends," replied M. Morel, with a mournful shake of his head, "the thing has assumed a more serious aspect than I expected." "Oh, truly, truly, sir, he is innocent," sobbed forth Mertz. "That I believe," answered M. Morel, "but still he is charged." "With what?" inquired the elder Dance. "With being an agent of the Bonapartist faction." Many of our readers may be able to recollect how formidable such an accusation became in the period at which our story is dated. A despairing cry escaped the pale lips of Mertz. The old man sank into a chair. "Ah, Danglars," whispered Cadros, "you have deceived me. The trick you spoke of last night has been played. But I cannot suffer a poor old man or an innocent girl to die of grief through your fault. I am determined to tell them all about it." Be silent, you simpleton, cried Danglars, grasping him by the arm, or I will not answer evening for your own safety. Who can tell whether Dance be innocent or guilty? The vessel did touch at Elba, where he quitted it, and passed a whole day in the island. Now, should any letters or other documents of a compromising character be found upon him, will it not be taken for granted that all who uphold him are his accomplices? With the rapid instinct of selfishness, Cedros readily perceived the solidity of this mode of reasoning. He gazed, doubtfully, wistfully, on Danglars, and then caution supplanted generosity. "Suppose we wait a while, and see what comes of it," said he, casting a bewildered look on his companion. "To be sure," answered Danglars. "Let us wait, by all means. If he be innocent, of course he will be set at liberty. If guilty, why, it is no use involving ourselves in a conspiracy. Let us go, then. I cannot stay here any longer." "With all my heart," replied Danglars, pleased to find the other so tractable. "Let us take ourselves out of the way, and leave things for the present to take their course." After their departure, Fernand, who had now again become the friend and protector of Merktz, led the girl to her home, while some friends of Dance conducted his father, nearly lifeless, to the Ales de Mailhan. The rumor of Edmond's arrest as a Bonapartist agent was not slow in circulating throughout the city. "Could you ever have credited such a thing, my dear Danglars?" asked M. Morel, as on his return to the port for the purpose of gleaning fresh tidings of Dance from M. de Villefort, the assistant procureur, he overtook his supercargo and Cedros. "Could you have believed such a thing possible?" "Why, you know I told you," replied Danglars, "that I considered the circumstance of his having anchored at the island of Elba as a very suspicious circumstance." "And did you mention these suspicions to any person beside myself?" "Certainly not," returned Danglars. Then added in a low whisper, "You understand that, on account of your uncle, M. Policar Morel, who served under the other government, and who does not altogether conceal what he thinks on the subject, you are strongly suspected of regretting the abdication of Napoleon. I should have feared to injure both Edmond and yourself had I divulged my own apprehensions to a soul. I am too well aware that though a subordinate, like myself, is bound to acquaint the shipowner with everything that occurs, there are many things he ought most carefully to conceal from all else." "It is well, Danglars, it is well," replied M. Morel. "You are a worthy fellow, and I had already thought of your interests in the event of poor Edmond having become captain of the Pharaon. Is it possible you were so kind?" "Yes, truly. I had previously inquired of Dance what was his opinion of you, and if he should have any reluctance to continue you in your post, for somehow I have perceived a sort of coolness between you." "And what was his reply?" "That he certainly did think he had given you offense in an affair which he merely referred to without entering into particulars, but that whoever possessed the good opinion and confidence of the ship's owners would have his preference also." "The hypocrite!" murmured Danglars. "Poor Dance," said Cedros. "No one can deny his being a noble-hearted young fellow." "But meanwhile," continued M. Morel, "here is the Pharaon without a captain." "Oh," replied Danglars, "since we cannot leave this port for the next 3 months, let us hope that before the expiration of that period Dance will be set at liberty." "No doubt, but in the meantime, I am entirely at your service, M. Morel," answered Danglars. "You know that I am as capable of managing a ship as the most experienced captain in the service, and it will be so far advantageous to you to accept my services, that upon Edmond's release from prison no further change will be requisite on board the Pharaon than for Dance and myself each to resume our respective posts." "Thanks, Danglars, that will smooth over all difficulties. I fully authorize you at once to assume the command of the Pharaon, and look carefully to the unloading of her freight. Private misfortunes must never be allowed to interfere with business. Be easy on that score, M. Morel. But do you think we shall be permitted to see our poor Edmond? I will let you know that directly I have seen M. de Villefort, whom I shall endeavor to interest in Edmond's favor. I am aware he is a furious royalist, but, in spite of that, and of his being king's attorney, he is a man like ourselves, and I fancy not a bad sort of one. Perhaps not, replied Danglars, but I hear that he is ambitious, and that's rather against him. Well, well, returned M. Moral, we shall see. But now hasten on board, I will join you there before long. So saying, the worthy shipowner quitted the two allies and proceeded in the direction of the Palais de Justice. You see, said Danglars, addressing Caedros, the turn things have taken. Do you still feel any desire to stand up in his defense? Not the slightest. But yet it seems to me a shocking thing that a mere joke should lead to such consequences. But who perpetrated that joke, let me ask? Neither you nor myself, but Fernand. You knew very well that I threw the paper into a corner of the room. Truly, I fancied I had destroyed it. Oh, no, replied Caedros, that I can answer for. You did not. I only wish I could see it now as plainly as I saw it lying all crushed and crumpled in a corner of the arbor. Well, then, if you did, depend upon it, Fernand picked it up, and either copied it or caused it to be copied. Perhaps, evening, he did not take the trouble of recopying it. And now I think of it, by heavens, he may have sent the letter itself. Fortunately, for me, the handwriting was disguised. Then you were aware of Dance being engaged in a conspiracy. Not I. As I before said, I thought the whole thing was a joke, nothing more. It seems, however, that I have unconsciously stumbled upon the truth. Still, argued Caedros, I would give a great deal if nothing of the kind had happened, or, at least, that I had had no hand in it. You will see, Danglars, that it will turn out an unlucky job for both of us. Nonsense. If any harm come of it, it should fall on the guilty person, and that, you know, is Fernand. How can we be implicated in any way? All we have got to do is to keep our own counsel and remain perfectly quiet, not breathing a word to any living soul, and you will see that the storm will pass away without in the least affecting us. Amen, responded Caedros, waving his hand in token of adieu to Danglars, and bending his steps towards the Allées de Milan, moving his head to and fro, and muttering as he went, after the manner of one whose mind was overcharged with one absorbing idea. So far, then, said Danglars mentally, all has gone as I would have it. I am, temporarily, commander of the Pharaon, with the certainty of being permanently so, if that fool of a Caedros can be persuaded to hold his tongue. My only fear is the chance of Dance being released. But there he is in the hands of justice, and, added he with a smile, she will take her own. So saying, he leaped into a boat, desiring to be rowed on board the Pharaon, where M. Chapter 6. The Deputy Procureur du Roi. In one of the aristocratic mansions built by Puget in the Rue du Grand Cours opposite the Medusa Fountain, a second marriage feast was being celebrated, almost at the same hour with the nuptial repast given by Dance. In this case, however, although the occasion of the entertainment was similar, the company was strikingly dissimilar. Instead of a rude mixture of sailors, soldiers, and those belonging to the humblest grade of life, the present assembly was composed of the very flower of Marseille society, magistrates who had resigned their office during the usurper's reign, officers who had deserted from the imperial army and joined forces with Conde, and younger members of families brought up to hate and execrate the man whom 5 years of exile would convert into a martyr, and 15 of restoration elevate to the rank of a god. The guests were still at table, and the heated and energetic conversation that prevailed betrayed the violent and vindictive passions that then agitated each dweller of the South, where unhappily for 5 centuries religious strife had long given increased bitterness to the violence of party feeling. The emperor, now king of the petty island of Elba, after having held sovereign sway over 1/2 of the world, counting as his subjects a small population of 5 or 6,000 souls, after having been accustomed to hear the 5 Napoleons of 120 millions of human beings, uttered in 10 different languages, was looked upon here as a ruined man, separated forever from any fresh connection with France or claim to her throne. The magistrates freely discussed their political views. The military part of the company talked unreservedly of Moscow and Leipzig, while the women commented on the divorce of Josephine. It was not over the downfall of the man, but over the defeat of the Napoleonic idea, that they rejoiced, and in this they foresaw for themselves the bright and cheering prospect of a revivified political existence. An old man, decorated with the cross of Saint Louis, now rose and proposed the health of King Louis Roman XVIII. It was the Marquis de Saint-Emran. This toast, recalling at once the patient exile of Hartwell and the peace-loving King of France, excited universal enthusiasm. Glasses were elevated in the air l'anglaise, and the ladies, snatching their bouquets from their fair bosoms, strewed the table with their floral treasures. In a word, an almost poetical fervor prevailed. "Ah," said the Marquise de Saint-Emran, a woman with a stern, forbidding eye, though still noble and distinguished in appearance, despite her 50 years, "ah, these revolutionists, who have driven us from those very possessions they afterwards purchased for a mere trifle during the reign of terror, would be compelled to own, were they here, that all true devotion was on our side, since we were content to follow the fortunes of a falling monarch, while they, on the contrary, made their fortune by worshipping the rising sun. Yes, yes, they could not help admitting that the king for whom we sacrificed rank, wealth, and station was truly our Louis the well-beloved, while their wretched usurper has been, and ever will be, to them their evil genius, their Napoleon the accursed. Am I not right, Villefort? I beg your pardon, madam. I really must pray you to excuse me, but, in truth, I was not attending to the conversation." Marquise, interposed the old nobleman who had proposed the toast, "let the young people alone. Let me tell you, on one's wedding day there are more agreeable subjects of conversation than dry politics." "Never mind, dearest mother," said a young and lovely girl, with a profusion of light brown hair and eyes that seemed to float in liquid crystal. "It is all my fault for seizing upon M. de Villefort, so as to prevent his listening to what you said. But there, now take him, he is your own for as long as you like. M. Villefort, I beg to remind you my mother speaks to you. If the Marquise will deign to repeat the words I but imperfectly caught, I shall be delighted to answer," said M. de Villefort. "Never mind, Renée," replied the Marquise, with a look of tenderness that seemed out of keeping with her harsh, dry features. "But however all other feelings may be withered in a woman's nature, there is always one bright smiling spot in the desert of her heart, and that is the shrine of maternal love." "I forgive you. What I was saying, Villefort, was that the Bonapartists had not our sincerity, enthusiasm, or devotion. They had, however, what supplied the place of those fine qualities," replied the young man, "and that was fanaticism. Napoleon is the Mahomet of the West, and is worshipped by his commonplace but ambitious followers, not only as a leader and lawgiver, but also as the personification of equality." "He," cried the Marquise, "Napoleon the type of equality. For mercy's sake, then, what would you call Robespierre? Come, come, do not strip the latter of his just rights to bestow them on the Corsican, who, to my mind, has usurped quite enough. No, madam, I would place each of these heroes on his right pedestal, that of Robespierre on his scaffold in the Place Louis Quinze, that of Napoleon on the column of the Place Vendôme. The only difference consists in the opposite character of the equality advocated by these two men. One is the equality that elevates, the other is the equality that degrades. One brings a king within reach of the guillotine, the other elevates the people to a level with the throne. Observe," said Villefort, smiling, "I do not mean to deny that both these men were revolutionary scoundrels, and that the 9th Thermidor and the 4th of April, in the year 1814, were lucky days for France, worthy of being gratefully remembered by every friend to monarchy and civil order, and that explains how it comes to pass that, fallen, as I trust he is forever, Napoleon has still retained a train of parasitical satellites. Still, Marquise, it has been so with other usurpers. Cromwell, for instance, who was not half so bad as Napoleon, had his partisans and advocates. Do you know, Villefort, that you are talking in a most dreadfully revolutionary strain? But I excuse it. It is impossible to expect the son of a Girondin to be free from a small spice of the old leaven." A deep crimson suffused the countenance of Villefort. "It is true, madam," answered he, "that my father was a Girondin, but he was not among the number of those who voted for the king's death. He was an equal sufferer with yourself during the reign of terror, and had well near lost his head on the same scaffold on which your father perished. True, replied the Marquise, without wincing in the slightest degree at the tragic remembrance thus called up. But bear in mind, if you please, that our respective parents underwent persecution and proscription from diametrically opposite principles, in proof of which I may remark, that while my family remained among the staunchest adherents of the exiled princes, your father lost no time in joining the new government, and that while the citizen Wardier was a Girondin, the Count Wardier became a senator. Dear mother, interposed Renee, you know very well it was agreed that all these disagreeable reminiscences should forever be laid aside. Suffer me, also, madam, replied Villefort, to add my earnest request to Mademoiselle de Saint-Emrans, that you will kindly allow the veil of oblivion to cover and conceal the past. What avails recrimination over matters wholly past recall? For my own part, I have laid aside evening the name of my father, and altogether disown his political principles. He was, no, probably may still be, a Bonapartist, and is called Noirtier. I, on the contrary, am a staunch royalist, and style myself de Villefort. Let what may remain of revolutionary sap exhaust itself and die away with the old trunk, and condescend only to regard the young shoot which has started up at a distance from the parent tree, without having the power, any more than the wish, to separate entirely from the stock from which it sprung. Bravo, Villefort, cried the Marquis. Excellently well said. Come, now, I have hopes of obtaining what I have been for years endeavoring to persuade the Marquise to promise, namely, a perfect amnesty and forgetfulness of the past. With all my heart, replied the Marquise, let the past be forever forgotten. I promise you it affords me as little pleasure to revive it as it does you. All I ask is that Villefort will be firm and inflexible for the future in his political principles. Remember, also, Villefort, that we have pledged ourselves to His Majesty for your fealty and strict loyalty, and that at our recommendation the king consented to forget the past, as I do, and here she extended to him her hand, as I now do at your entreaty. But bear in mind, that should there fall in your way anyone guilty of conspiring against the government, you will be so much the more bound to visit the offense with rigorous punishment, as it is known you belong to a suspected family. Alas, madam, returned Villefort, my profession, as well as the times in which we live, compels me to be severe. I have already successfully conducted several public prosecutions, and brought the offenders to merited punishment. But we have not done with the thing yet. Do you, truly, think so? Inquired the Marquise. I am, at least, fearful of it. Napoleon, in the island of Elba, is too near France, and his proximity keeps up the hopes of his partisans. Marseille is filled with half-pay officers, who are daily, under one frivolous pretext or other, getting up quarrels with the royalists. From therefore arise continual and fatal duels among the higher classes of persons, and assassinations in the lower. You have heard, perhaps, said the Comte de Salvia, one of M. de Saint-Emran's oldest friends, and chamberlain to the Comte d'Artois, that the Holy Alliance purpose removing him from there. Yes, they were talking about it when we left Paris, said M. de Saint-Emran. And where is it decided to transfer him? To Saint Helena. For heaven's sake, where is that? Asked the Marquise. An island situated on the other side of the equator, at least 2,000 leagues from here, replied the Count. So much the better. As Villefort observes, it is a great act of folly to have left such a man between Corsica, where he was born, and Naples, of which his brother-in-law is king, and face to face with Italy, the sovereignty of which he coveted for his son. Unfortunately, said Villefort, there are the treaties of 1814, and we cannot molest Napoleon without breaking those compacts. Oh, well, we shall find some way out of it, responded M. de Salvia. There wasn't any trouble over treaties when it was a question of shooting the poor duck d'Enghien. Well, said the Marquise, it seems probable that, by the aid of the Holy Alliance, we shall be rid of Napoleon, and we must trust to the vigilance of M. de Villefort to purify Marseille of his partisans. The king is either a king or no king. If he be acknowledged as sovereign of France, he should be upheld in peace and tranquillity, and this can best be effected by employing the most inflexible agents to put down every attempt at conspiracy. It is the best and surest means of preventing mischief. Unfortunately, madam, answered Villefort, the strong arm of the law is not called upon to interfere until the evil has taken place. Then all he has got to do is to endeavor to repair it. No, madam, the law is frequently powerless to effect this. All it can do is to avenge the wrong done. Oh, de Villefort, cried a beautiful young creature, daughter to the Comte de Salvia, and the cherished friend of Mademoiselle de Saint-Emran, do try and get up some famous trial while we are at Marseille. I never was in a law court. I am told it is so very amusing. Amusing, certainly, replied the young man, inasmuch as, instead of shedding tears as at the fictitious tale of woe produced at a theatre, you behold in a law court a case of real and genuine distress, a drama of life. The prisoner whom you there see pale, agitated, and alarmed, instead of, as is the case when a curtain falls on a tragedy, going home to sup peacefully with his family, and then retiring to rest, that he may recommence his mimic woes on the tomorrow, is removed from your sight merely to be reconducted to his prison and delivered up to the executioner. I leave you to judge how far your nerves are calculated to bear you through such a scene. Of this, however, be assured, that should any favorable opportunity present itself, I will not fail to offer you the choice of being present. For shame, de Villefort, said Renée, becoming quite pale. Don't you see how you are frightening us? And yet you laugh. What would you have? It is like a duel. I have already recorded sentence of death, 5 or 6 times, against the movers of political conspiracies, and who can say how many daggers may be ready sharpened, and only waiting a favorable opportunity to be buried in my heart. Gracious heavens, de Villefort, said Renée, becoming more and more terrified, you surely are not in earnest. Truly I am, replied the young magistrate with a smile, and in the interesting trial that young lady is anxious to witness, the case would only be still more aggravated. Suppose, for instance, the prisoner, as is more than probable, to have served under Napoleon, well, can you expect for an instant that one accustomed, at the word of his commander, to rush fearlessly on the very bayonets of his foe, will scruple more to drive a stiletto into the heart of one he knows to be his personal enemy, than to slaughter his fellow creatures merely because bidden to do so by one he is bound to obey? Besides, one requires the excitement of being hateful in the eyes of the accused, in order to lash oneself into a state of sufficient vehemence and power. I would not choose to see the man against whom I pleaded smile, as though in mockery of my words. No, my pride is to see the accused pale, agitated, and as though beaten out of all composure by the fire of my eloquence. Renée uttered a smothered exclamation. Bravo, cried one of the guests. That is what I call talking to some purpose. Just the person we require at a time like the present, said a second. What a splendid business that last case of yours was, my dear Villefort, remarked a third. I mean the trial of the man for murdering his father. Upon my word, you killed him before the executioner had laid his hand upon him. Oh, as for parricides and such dreadful people as that, interposed Renée, it matters very little what is done to them. But as regards poor unfortunate creatures whose only crime consists in having mixed themselves up in political intrigues, why, that is the very worst offense they could possibly commit. For, don't you see, Renée, the king is the father of his people, and he who shall plot or contrive aught against the life and safety of the parent of 32 millions of souls, is a parricide upon a fearfully great scale. I don't know anything about that, replied Renée, but, de Villefort, you have promised me, have you not, always to show mercy to those I plead for? Make yourself quite easy on that point, answered Villefort, with one of his sweetest smiles. You and I will always consult upon our verdicts. My love, said the Marquise, attend to your doves, your lapdogs, and embroidery, but do not meddle with what you do not understand. Nowadays the military profession is in abeyance and the magisterial robe is the badge of honor. There is a wise Latin proverb that is very much in point. Sedent arma taug, said Villefort with a bow. I cannot speak Latin, responded the Marquise. Well, said Rene, I cannot help regretting you had not chosen some other profession than your own, a physician, for instance. Do you know I always felt a shudder at the idea of evening a destroying angel. Dear, good Rene, whispered Villefort, as he gazed with unutterable tenderness on the lovely speaker. Let us hope, my child, cried the Marquis, that M. de Villefort may prove the moral and political physician of this province. If so, he will have achieved a noble work, and one which will go far to efface the recollection of his father's conduct, added the incorrigible Marquise. Madam, replied Villefort, with a mournful smile, I have already had the honor to observe that my father has, at least, I hope so, abjured his past errors, and that he is, at the present moment, a firm and zealous friend to religion and order, a better royalist, possibly, than his son, for he has to atone for past dereliction, while I have no other impulse than warm, decided preference and conviction. Having made this well-turned speech, Villefort looked carefully around to mark the effect of his oratory, much as he would have done had he been addressing the bench in open court. Do you know, my dear Villefort, cried the Comte de Salvia, that is exactly what I myself said the other day at the Tuileries, when questioned by His Majesty's principal chamberlain touching the singularity of an alliance between the son of a Girondin and the daughter of an officer of the Duc de Caen, and I assure you he seemed fully to comprehend that this mode of reconciling political differences was based upon sound and excellent principles. Then the king, who, without our suspecting it, had overheard our conversation, interrupted us by saying, Villefort, observe that the king did not pronounce the word Noirtier, but, on the contrary, placed considerable emphasis on that of Villefort. Villefort, said His Majesty, is a young man of great judgment and discretion, who will be sure to make a figure in his profession. I like him much, and it gave me great pleasure to hear that he was about to become the son-in-law of the Marquis and Marquise de Saint-Emran. I should myself have recommended the match, had not the noble Marquis anticipated my wishes by requesting my consent to it. Is it possible the king could have condescended so far as to express himself so favorably of me? Asked the enraptured Villefort. I give you his very words, and if the Marquis chooses to be candid, he will confess that they perfectly agree with what His Majesty said to him when he went 6 months ago to consult him upon the subject of your espousing his daughter. That is true, answered the Marquis. How much do I owe this gracious prince? What is there I would not do to evince my earnest gratitude? That is right, cried the Marquise. I love to see you thus. Now, then, were a conspirator to fall into your hands, he would be most welcome. For my part, dear mother, interposed Renée, I trust your wishes will not prosper, and that Providence will only permit petty offenders, poor debtors, and miserable cheats to fall into M. de Villefort's hands. Then I shall be contented, just the same as though you prayed that a physician may only be called upon to prescribe for headaches, measles, and the stings of wasps, or any other slight affection of the epidermis. If you wish to see me the king's attorney, you must desire for me some of those violent and dangerous diseases from the cure of which so much honor redounds to the physician. At this moment, and as though the utterance of Villefort's wish had sufficed to effect its accomplishment, a servant entered the room, and whispered a few words in his ear. Villefort immediately rose from table and quitted the room upon the plea of urgent business. He soon, however, returned, his whole face beaming with delight. Renée regarded him with fond affection, and certainly his handsome features, lit up as they then were with more than usual fire and animation, seemed formed to excite the innocent admiration with which she gazed on her graceful and intelligent lover. You were wishing just now, said Villefort, addressing her, that I were a doctor instead of a lawyer. Well, I at least resemble the disciples of Aesculapius in one thing. People spoke in this style in 1815, that of not being able to call a day my own, not evening that of my betrothal. And therefore were you called away just now? Asked Mademoiselle de Saint-Emran with an air of deep interest. For a very serious matter, which bids fair to make work for the executioner. How dreadful! Exclaimed Renée, turning pale. Is it possible? Burst simultaneously from all who were near enough to the magistrate to hear his words. Why, if my information prove correct, a sort of Bonapartist conspiracy has just been discovered. Can I believe my ears? Cried the Marquise. I will read you the letter containing the accusation, at least, said Villefort. The king's attorney is informed by a friend to the throne and the religious institutions of his country that one named Edmond Dance, mate of the ship Pharaon, this day arrived from Smyrna, after having touched at Naples and Porto Ferrajo, has been the bearer of a letter from Murat to the usurper, and again taken charge of another letter from the usurper to the Bonapartist club in Paris. Ample corroboration of this statement may be obtained by arresting the above-mentioned Edmond Dance, who either carries the letter for Paris about with him, or has it at his father's abode. Should it not be found in the possession of father or son, then it will assuredly be discovered in the cabin belonging to the said Dance on board the Pharaon. But, said René, this letter, which, after all, is but an anonymous scrawl, is not evening addressed to you, but to the king's attorney. True, but that gentleman being absent, his secretary, by his orders, opened his letters, thinking this one of importance, he sent for me, but not finding me, took upon himself to give the necessary orders for arresting the accused party. Then the guilty person is absolutely in custody, said the Marquise. No, dear mother, say the accused person. You know we cannot yet pronounce him guilty. He is in safe custody, answered Villefort, and rely upon it. If the letter is found, he will not be likely to be trusted abroad again, unless he goes forth under the especial protection of the headsman. And where is the unfortunate being? Asked René. He is at my house. Come, my friend, interrupted the Marquise, do not neglect your duty to linger with us. You are the king's servant, and must go wherever that service calls you. Oh, Villefort, cried René, clasping her hands, and looking towards her lover with piteous earnestness, be merciful on this the day of our betrothal. The young man passed round to the side of the table where the fair pleader sat, and leaning over her chair said tenderly, to give you pleasure, my sweet René, I promise to show all the lenity in my power. But if the charges brought against this Bonapartist hero prove correct, why, then, you really must give me leave to order his head to be cut off. René shuddered at the word cut, for the growth in question had a head. Never mind that foolish girl, Villefort, said the Marquise. She will soon get over these things. So saying, Madame de Saint-Emran extended her dry bony hand to Villefort, who, while imprinting a son-in-law's respectful salute on it, looked at René, as much as to say, I must try and fancy it is your dear hand I kiss, as it should have been. These are mournful auspices to accompany a betrothal, sighed poor René. Upon my word, child, exclaimed the angry Marquise, your folly exceeds all bounds. I should be glad to know what connection there can possibly be between your sickly sentimentality and the affairs of the state. Oh, mother, murmured René. No, madam, I pray you pardon this little traitor. Chapter 7. The Examination. No sooner had Villefort left the salon than he assumed the grave air of a man who holds the balance of life and death in his hands. Now, in spite of the nobility of his countenance, the command of which, like a finished actor, he had carefully studied before the glass, it was by no means easy for him to assume an air of judicial severity, except the recollection of the line of politics his father had adopted, and which may interfere, unless he acted with the greatest prudence, with his own career. Garde de Villefort was as happy as a man could be. Already rich, he held a high official situation, though only 27. He was about to marry a young and charming woman whom he loved not passionately, but reasonably, as became a deputy attorney of the king, and besides her personal attractions, which were very great, Mademoiselle de Saint-Emran's family possessed considerable political influence, which they would, of course, exert in his favor. The dowry of his wife amounted to 50,000 crowns, and he had, besides, the prospect of seeing her fortune increased to 500,000 at her father's death. These considerations naturally gave Villefort a feeling of such complete felicity that his mind was fairly dazzled in its contemplation. At the door he met the commissary of police, who was waiting for him. The sight of this officer recalled Villefort from the third heaven to earth. He composed his face, as we have before described, and said, I have read the letter, sir, and you have acted rightly in arresting this man. Now inform me what you have discovered concerning him and the conspiracy. We know nothing as yet of the conspiracy, monsieur. All the papers found have been sealed up and placed on your desk. The prisoner himself is named Edmund Dance, mate on board the three-master the Pharaon, trading in cotton with Alexandria and Smyrna, and belonging to Morel and son of Marseille. Before he'd entered the merchant service, had he ever served in the marines? Oh, no, monsieur, he is very young. How old? 19 or 20 at the most. At this moment, and as Villefort had arrived at the corner of the Rue des Conseils, a man, who seemed to have been waiting for him, approached. It was M. Morel. Ah, M. de Villefort, cried he. I am delighted to see you. Some of your people have committed the strangest mistake. They have just arrested Edmund Dance, mate of my vessel. I know it, monsieur, replied Villefort, and I am now going to examine him. Oh, said Morel, carried away by his friendship, you do not know him, and I do. He is the most estimable, the most trustworthy creature in the world, and I will venture to say, there is not a better seaman in all the merchant service. Oh, M. de Villefort, I beseech your indulgence for him. Villefort, as we have seen, belonged to the aristocratic party at Marseille, Morel to the plebeian. The first was a royalist, the other suspected of Bonapartism. Villefort looked disdainfully at Morel, and replied coldly, You are aware, monsieur, that a man may be estimable and trustworthy in private life, and the best seaman in the merchant service, and yet be, politically speaking, a great criminal. Is it not true? The magistrate laid emphasis on these words, as if he wished to apply them to the owner himself, while his eyes seemed to plunge into the heart of one who, interceding for another, had himself need of indulgence. Morel reddened, for his own conscience was not quite clear on politics. Besides, what Dance had told him of his interview with the Grand Marshal, and what the Emperor had said to him, embarrassed him. He replied, however, in a tone of deep interest, I entreat you, M. de Villefort, be, as you always are, kind and equitable, and give him back to us soon. This give us sounded revolutionary in the deputy's ears. Ah, murmured he, is Dance then a member of some Carbonari society, that his protector thus employs the collective form? He was, if I recollect, arrested in a tavern, in company with a great many others. Then he added, Monsieur, you may rest assured I shall perform my duty impartially, and that if he be innocent you shall not have appealed to me in vain. Should he, however, be guilty, in this present epoch, impunity would furnish a dangerous example, and I must do my duty. As he had now arrived at the door of his own house, which adjoined the Palais de Justice, he entered, after having coldly saluted the shipowner, who stood, as if petrified, on the spot where Villefort had left him. The antechamber was full of police agents and gendarmes, in the midst of whom, carefully watched, but calm and smiling, stood the prisoner. Villefort traversed the antechamber, cast a side glance at Dance, and taking a packet which a gendarme offered him, disappeared, saying, Bring in the prisoner. Rapid as had been Villefort's glance, it had served to give him an idea of the man he was about to interrogate. He had recognized intelligence in the high forehead, courage in the dark eye and bent brow, and frankness in the thick lips that showed a set of pearly teeth. Villefort's first impression was favorable, but he had been so often warned to mistrust first impulses that he applied the maxim to the impression, forgetting the difference between the two words. He stifled, therefore, the feelings of compassion that were rising, composed his features, and sat down, grim and somber, at his desk. An instant after Dance entered. He was pale, but calm and collected, and saluting his judge with easy politeness, looked round for a seat, as if he had been in M. Morel's salon. It was then that he encountered for the first time Villefort's look, that look peculiar to the magistrate, who, while seeming to read the thoughts of others, betrays nothing of his own. Who and what are you? demanded Villefort, turning over a pile of papers containing information relative to the prisoner that a police agent had given to him on his entry, and that, already, in an hour's time, had swelled to voluminous proportions, thanks to the corrupt espionage of which the accused is always made the victim. "My name is Edmund Dance," replied the young man calmly. "I'm mate of the Pharaon, belonging to Mess Morel and Son." "Your age?" continued Villefort. 19, returned Dance. "What were you doing at the moment you were arrested?" "I was at the festival of my marriage, monsieur," said the young man, his voice slightly tremulous. So great was the contrast between that happy moment and the painful ceremony he was now undergoing. So great was the contrast between the somber aspect of M. de Villefort and the radiant face of Mertz. "You were at the festival of your marriage?" said the deputy, shuddering in spite of himself. "Yes, monsieur. I am on the point of marrying a young girl I have been attached to for 3 years." Villefort, impassive as he was struck with this coincidence, and the tremulous voice of Dance, surprised in the amid of his happiness, struck a sympathetic chord in his own bosom. He also was on the point of being married, and he was summoned from his own happiness to destroy that of another. This philosophic reflection, thought he, will make a great sensation at M. de Saint-Emran's, and he arranged mentally, while Dance awaited further questions, the antithesis by which orders often create a reputation for eloquence. When this speech was arranged, Villefort turned to Dance. "Go on, sir," said he. "What would you have me say?" "Give all the information in your power. Tell me on which point you desire information, and I will tell all I know. Only," added he, with a smile, "I warn you I know very little. Have you served under the usurper?" "I was about to be mustered into the Royal Marines when he fell." "It is reported your political opinions are extreme," said Villefort, who had never heard anything of the kind, but was not sorry to make this inquiry as if it were an accusation. "My political opinions," replied Dance. "Alas, sir, I never had any opinions. I am hardly 19. I know nothing. I have no part to play. If I obtain the situation I desire, I shall owe it to M. Moral. Thus all my opinions, I will not say public, but private, are confined to these 3 sentiments. I love my father, I respect M. Moral, and I adore Mertz. This, sir, is all I can tell you, and you see how uninteresting it is." As Dance spoke, Villefort gazed at his ingenuous and open countenance, and recollected the words of Rene, who, without knowing who the culprit was, had besought his indulgence for him. With the deputy's knowledge of crime and criminals, every word the young man uttered convinced him more and more of his innocence. This lad, for he was scarcely a man, simple, natural, eloquent with that eloquence of the heart never found when sought for, full of affection for everybody, because he was happy, and because happiness renders evening the wicked good, extended his affection evening to his judge, spite of Villefort's severe look and stern accent. Dance seemed full of kindness. "Pardieu," said Villefort, "he is a noble fellow. I hope I shall gain Rene's favor easily by obeying the first command she ever imposed on me. I shall have at least a pressure of the hand in public, and a sweet kiss in private." Full of this idea, Villefort's face became so joyous, that when he turned to Dance, the latter, who had watched the change on his physiognomy, was smiling also. "Sir," said Villefort, "have you any enemies, at least, that you know?" "I have enemies," replied Dance. "My position is not sufficiently elevated for that. As for my disposition, that is perhaps somewhat too hasty, but I have striven to repress it. I have had 10 or 12 sailors under me, and if you question them, they will tell you that they love and respect me, not as a father, for I am too young, but as an elder brother. But you may have excited jealousy. You are about to become captain at 19, an elevated post. You are about to marry a pretty girl who loves you, and these 2 pieces of good fortune may have excited the envy of someone. You are right. You know men better than I do, and what you say may possibly be the case, I confess. But if such persons are among my acquaintances, I prefer not to know it, because then I should be forced to hate them. You are wrong. You should always strive to see clearly around you. You seem a worthy young man. I will depart from the strict line of my duty to aid you in discovering the author of this accusation. Here is the paper. Do you know the writing?" As he spoke, Villefort drew the letter from his pocket and presented it to Dance. "Dance, read it." A cloud passed over his brow as he said, "No, monsieur, I do not know the writing, and yet it is tolerably plain. Whoever did it writes well. I am very fortunate," added he, looking gratefully at Villefort, "to be examined by such a man as you, for this envious person is a real enemy." And by the rapid glance that the young man's eyes shot forth, Villefort saw how much energy lay hid beneath this mildness. "Now," said the deputy, "answer me frankly, not as a prisoner to a judge, but as one man to another who takes an interest in him. What truth is there in the accusation contained in this anonymous letter?" And Villefort threw disdainfully on his desk the letter Dance had just given back to him. "None at all. I will tell you the real facts. I swear by my honor as a sailor, by my love for Merktz, by the life of my father." "Speak, monsieur," said Villefort. Then, internally, if Renée could see me, I hoped she would be satisfied, and would no longer call me a decapitator. Well, when we quitted Naples, Captain Leclerc was attacked with a brain fever, as we had no doctor on board, and he was so anxious to arrive at Elba that he would not touch at any other port. His disorder rose to such a height that at the end of the third day, feeling he was dying, he called me to him. "My dear Dance," said he, "swear to perform what I am going to tell you, for it is a matter of the deepest importance." "I swear, Captain," replied I. "Well, as after my death the command devolves on you as mate, assume the command and bear up for the island of Elba. Disembark at Porto Ferrajo, ask for the Grand Marshal, give him this letter, perhaps they will give you another letter, and charge you with a commission. You will accomplish what I was to have done, and derive all the honor and profit from it. I will do it, Captain. But perhaps I shall not be admitted to the Grand Marshal's presence as easily as you expect. Here is a ring that will obtain audience of him, and remove every difficulty," said the captain. At these words he gave me a ring. It was time. 2 hours after he was delirious. The next day he died. "And what did you do then?" "What I ought to have done, and whatever one would have done in my place. Everywhere the last requests of a dying man are sacred, but with a sailor the last requests of his superior are commands. I sailed for the island of Elba, where I arrived the next day. I ordered everybody to remain on board, and went on shore alone. As I had expected, I found some difficulty in obtaining access to the Grand Marshal, but I sent the ring I had received from the captain to him, and was instantly admitted. He questioned me concerning Captain Leclerc's death, and, as the latter had told me, gave me a letter to carry on to a person in Paris. I undertook it because it was what my captain had bade me do. I landed here, regulated the affairs of the vessel, and hastened to visit my affianced bride, whom I found more lovely than ever. Thanks to M. Moral, all the forms were got over. In a word, I was, as I told you, at my marriage feast, and I should have been married in an hour, and tomorrow I intended to start for Paris had I not been arrested on this charge which you as well as I now see to be unjust. "Ah," said Villefort, "this seems to me the truth. If you have been culpable, it was imprudence, and this imprudence was in obedience to the orders of your captain. Give up this letter you have brought from Elba, and pass your word you will appear should you be required, and go and rejoin your friends." "I am free, then, sir," cried Dance joyfully. "Yes, but first give me this letter. You have it already, for it was taken from me with some others, which I see in that packet." "Stop a moment," said the deputy, as Dance took his hat and gloves. "To whom is it addressed?" "To Monsieur Noirtier, Rue Coq-Catron, Paris." Had a thunderbolt fallen into the room, Villefort could not have been more stupefied. He sank into his seat, and hastily turning over the packet, drew forth the fatal letter, at which he glanced with an expression of terror. "M. Noirtier, Rue Coq-Catron, No. 13, murmured he, growing still paler. "Yes," said Dance. "Do you know him?" "No," replied Villefort. "A faithful servant of the king does not know conspirators." "It is a conspiracy, then?" asked Dance, who, after believing himself free, now began to feel a tenfold alarm. I have, however, already told you, sir, I was entirely ignorant of the contents of the letter. Yes, but you knew the name of the person to whom it was addressed, said Villefort. I was forced to read the address to know to whom to give it. Have you shown this letter to anyone? Asked Villefort, becoming still more pale. To no one, on my honor. Everybody is ignorant that you are the bearer of a letter from the island of Elba and addressed to M. Noirtier. Everybody, except the person who gave it to me. And that was too much, far too much, murmured Villefort. Villefort's brow darkened more and more, his white lips and clenched teeth filled Dance with apprehension. After reading the letter, Villefort covered his face with his hands. Oh, said Dance timidly, what is the matter? Villefort made no answer, but raised his head at the expiration of a few seconds and again perused the letter. And you say that you are ignorant of the contents of this letter? I give you my word of honor, sir, said Dance, but what is the matter? You are ill. Shall I ring for assistance? Shall I call? No, said Villefort, rising hastily. Stay where you are. It is for me to give orders here, and not you. Monsieur, replied Dance proudly, it was only to summon assistance for you. I want none. It was a temporary indisposition. Attend to yourself. Answer me. Dance waited, expecting a question, but in vain. Villefort fell back on his chair, passed his hand over his brow moist with perspiration, and, for the third time, read the letter. Oh, if he knows the contents of this, murmured he, and that Noirtier is the father of Villefort, I am lost. And he fixed his eyes upon Edmond as if he would have penetrated his thoughts. Oh, it is impossible to doubt it, cried he, suddenly. In heaven's name, cried the unhappy young man, if you doubt me, question me. I will answer you. Villefort made a violent effort, and in a tone he strove to render firm. Sir, said he, I am no longer able, as I had hoped, to restore you immediately to liberty. Before doing so, I must consult the trial justice. What my own feeling is you already know. Oh, monsieur, cried Dance, you have been rather a friend than a judge. Well, I must detain you some time longer, but I will strive to make it as short as possible. The principal charge against you is this letter, and you see, Villefort approached the fire, cast it in, and waited until it was entirely consumed. You see, I destroy it. Oh, exclaimed Dance, you are goodness itself. Listen, continued Villefort, you can now have confidence in me after what I have done. Oh, command, and I will obey. Listen, this is not a command but advice I give you. Speak, and I will follow your advice. I shall detain you until this evening in the Palais de Justice. Should anyone else interrogate you, say to him what you have said to me, but do not breathe a word of this letter. I promise. It was Villefort who seemed to entreat, and the prisoner who reassured him. You see, continued he, glancing toward the grate, where fragments of burnt paper fluttered in the flames, the letter is destroyed. You and I alone know of its existence. Should you, therefore, be questioned, deny all knowledge of it. Deny it boldly, and you are saved. Be satisfied. I will deny it. It was the only letter you had? It was. Swear it. I swear it. Villefort rang. A police agent entered. Villefort whispered some words in his ear, to which the officer replied by a motion of his head. Follow him, said Villefort to Dance. Dance saluted Villefort and retired. Hardly had the door closed when Villefort threw himself half fainting into a chair. Alas, alas, murmured he, if the procureur himself had been at Marseille I should have been ruined. This accursed letter would have destroyed all my hopes. Oh, my father, must your past career always interfere with my successes? Suddenly a light passed over his face, a smile played round his set mouth, and his haggard eyes were fixed in thought. This will do, said he, and from this letter, which may have ruined me, I will make my fortune. Chapter 8. The Château d'If. The commissary of police, as he traversed the antechamber, made a sign to two gendarmes, who placed themselves one on Dance's right and the other on his left. A door that communicated with the Palais de Justice was opened, and they went through a long range of gloomy corridors, whose appearance may have made evening the boldest shudder. The Palais de Justice communicated with the prison, a sombre edifice that from its grated windows looks on the clock tower of the Écoles. After numberless windings, Dance saw a door with an iron wicket. The commissary took up an iron mallet and knocked thrice, every blow seeming to Dance as if struck on his heart. The door opened, the two gendarmes gently pushed him forward, and the door closed with a loud sound behind him. The air he inhaled was no longer pure, but thick and mephitic. He was in prison. He was conducted to a tolerably neat chamber, but grated and barred, and its appearance, therefore, did not greatly alarm him. Besides, the words of Villefort, who seemed to interest himself so much, resounded still in his ears like a promise of freedom. It was 4 o'clock when Dance was placed in this chamber. It was, as we have said, the 1st of March, and the prisoner was soon buried in darkness. The obscurity augmented the acuteness of his hearing. At the slightest sound he rose and hastened to the door, convinced they were about to liberate him. But the sound died away, and Dance sank again into his seat. At last, about 10 o'clock, and just as Dance began to despair, steps were heard in the corridor, a key turned in the lock, the bolts creaked, the massy oaken door flew open, and a flood of light from 2 torches pervaded the apartment. By the torchlight Dance saw the glittering sabers and carbines of 4 gendarmes. He had advanced at first, but stopped at the sight of this display of force. "Are you come to fetch me?" asked he. "Yes," replied a gendarme. "By the orders of the deputy procureur?" "I believe so." The conviction that they came from M. de Villefort relieved all Dance's apprehensions. He advanced calmly, and placed himself in the center of the escort. A carriage waited at the door, the coachman was on the box, and a police officer sat beside him. "Is this carriage for me?" said Dance. "It is for you," replied a gendarme. Dance was about to speak, but feeling himself urged forward, and having neither the power nor the intention to resist, he mounted the steps, and was in an instant seated inside between 2 gendarmes. The 2 others took their places opposite, and the carriage rolled heavily over the stones. The prisoner glanced at the windows. They were grated. He had changed his prison for another that was conveying him he knew not where. Through the grating, however, Dance saw they were passing through the Rue Caisserie, and by the Rue Saint Laurent and the Rue Taramis, to the quay. Soon he saw the lights of Lac and Seine. The carriage stopped. The officer descended, approached the guardhouse. A dozen soldiers came out and formed themselves in order. Dance saw the reflection of their muskets by the light of the lamps on the quay. "Can all this force be summoned on my account?" thought he. The officer opened the door, which was locked, and, without speaking a word, answered Dance's question, for he saw between the ranks of the soldiers a passage formed from the carriage to the port. The 2 gendarmes, who were opposite to him, descended first, then he was ordered to alight, and the gendarmes on each side of him followed his example. They advanced towards a boat, which a custom-house officer held by a chain, near the quay. The soldiers looked at Dance with an air of stupid curiosity. In an instant he was placed in the stern sheets of the boat, between the gendarmes, while the officer stationed himself at the bow. A shove sent the boat adrift, and 4 sturdy oarsmen impelled it rapidly towards the pylon. At a shout from the boat, the chain that closes the mouth of the port was lowered, and in a second they were, as Dance knew, in the Friaule and outside the inner harbor. The prisoner's first feeling was of joy at again breathing the pure air, for air is freedom. But he soon sighed, for he passed before La Arcerf, where he had that morning been so happy, and now through the open windows came the laughter and revelry of a ball. Dance folded his hands, raised his eyes to heaven, and prayed fervently. The boat continued her voyage. They had passed the Tte de Mort, were now off the Anse du Pharaoh, and about to double the battery. This maneuver was incomprehensible to Dance. "Where are you taking me?" asked he. "You will soon know. But still, we are forbidden to give you any explanation." Dance, trained in discipline, knew that nothing would be more absurd than to question subordinates, who were forbidden to reply, and so he remained silent. The most vague and wild thoughts passed through his mind. The boat they were in could not make a long voyage. There was no vessel at anchor outside the harbor, he thought. Perhaps they were going to leave him on some distant point. He was not bound, nor had they made any attempt to handcuff him. This seemed a good augury. Besides, had not the deputy, who had been so kind to him, told him that provided he did not pronounce the dreaded name of Noirtier, he had nothing to apprehend? Had not Villefort in his presence destroyed the fatal letter, the only proof against him? He waited silently, striving to pierce through the darkness. They had left the Isle Ratonneau, where the lighthouse stood, on the right, and were now opposite the Point des Catalans. It seemed to the prisoner that he could distinguish a feminine form on the beach, for it was there Merkts dwelt. How was it that a presentiment did not warn Merkts that her lover was within 300 yards of her? One light alone was visible, and Dance saw that it came from Merkts' chamber. Merkts was the only one awake in the whole settlement. A loud cry could be heard by her, but pride restrained him and he did not utter it. What would his guards think if they heard him shout like a madman? He remained silent, his eyes fixed upon the light. The boat went on, but the prisoner thought only of Merkts. An intervening elevation of land hid the light. Dance turned and perceived that they had got out to sea. While he had been absorbed in thought, they had shipped their oars and hoisted sail. The boat was now moving with the wind. In spite of his repugnance to address the guards, Dance turned to the nearest gendarme, and taking his hand, "Comrade," said he, "I adjure you, as a Christian and a soldier, to tell me where we are going. I am Captain Dance, a loyal Frenchman, thought accused of treason. Tell me where you are conducting me, and I promise you on my honor I will submit to my fate." The gendarme looked irresolutely at his companion, who returned for answer a sign that said, "I see no great harm in telling him now," and the gendarme replied, "You are a native of Marseille, and a sailor, and yet you do not know where you are going? On my honor, I have no idea." "Have you no idea whatever?" "None at all. That is impossible. I swear to you it is true. Tell me, I entreat." "But my orders—" "Your orders do not forbid your telling me what I must know in 10 minutes, in half an hour, or an hour. You see I cannot escape, even if I intended. Unless you are blind, or have never been outside the harbor, you must know. I do not. Look round you then." Dance rose, and looked forward, when he saw rise within 100 yards of him the black and frowning rock on which stands the Ch. This gloomy fortress, which has for more than 300 years furnished food for so many wild legends, seemed to Dance like a scaffold to a malefactor. "The Ch. cried he. "What are we going there for?" The gendarme smiled. "I am not going there to be imprisoned," said Dance. "It is only used for political prisoners. I have committed no crime. Are there any magistrates or judges at the Ch. "There are only," said the gendarme, "a governor, a garrison, turnkeys, and good thick walls. Come, come, do not look so astonished, or you will make me think you are laughing at me in return for my good nature." Dance pressed the gendarme's hand as though he would crush it. "You think, then," said he, "that I am taken to the Ch. to be imprisoned there. It is probable, but there is no occasion to squeeze so hard. Without any inquiry, without any formality. All the formalities have been gone through. The inquiry is already made. And so, in spite of M. de Villefort's promises—" "I do not know what M. de Villefort promised you," said the gendarme, "but I know we are taking you to the Ch. "But what are you doing? Help, comrades, help!" By a rapid movement, which the gendarme's practiced eye had perceived, Dance sprang forward to precipitate himself into the sea, but 4 vigorous arms seized him as his feet quitted the bottom of the boat. He fell back cursing with rage. "Good," said the gendarme, placing his knee on his chest. "This is the way you keep your word as a sailor. Believe soft-spoken gentlemen again. Hark ye, my friend, I have disobeyed my first order, but I will not disobey the second, and if you move, I will blow your brains out." and he leveled his carbine at Dance, who felt the muzzle against his temple. For a moment the idea of struggling crossed his mind, and of so ending the unexpected evil that had overtaken him. But he bethought him of M. de Villefort's promise, and, besides, death in a boat from the hand of a gendarme seemed too terrible. He remained motionless, but gnashing his teeth and wringing his hands with fury. At this moment the boat came to a landing with a violent shock. One of the sailors leaped on shore, a cord creaked as it ran through a pulley, and Dance guessed they were at the end of the voyage, and that they were mooring the boat. His guards, taking him by the arms and coat collar, forced him to rise, and dragged him towards the steps that lead to the gate of the fortress, while the police officer carrying a musket with fixed bayonet followed behind. Dance made no resistance. He was like a man in a dream. He saw soldiers drawn up on the embankment. He knew vaguely that he was ascending a flight of steps. He was conscious that he passed through a door, and that the door closed behind him, but all this indistinctly as through a mist. He did not even see the ocean, that terrible barrier against freedom, which the prisoners look upon with utter despair. They halted for a minute, during which he strove to collect his thoughts. He looked around. He was in a court surrounded by high walls. He heard the measured tread of sentinels, and as they passed before the light he saw the barrels of their muskets shine. They waited upwards of 10 minutes. Certain Dance could not escape. The gendarmes released him. They seemed awaiting orders. The orders came. "Where is the prisoner?" said a voice. "Here," replied the gendarmes. "Let him follow me. I will take him to his cell." "Go," said the gendarmes, thrusting Dance forward. The prisoner followed his guide, who led him into a room almost underground, whose bare and reeking walls seemed as though impregnated with tears. A lamp placed on a stool illumined the apartment faintly, and showed Dance the features of his conductor, an under jailer, ill-clothed, and of sullen appearance. "Here is your chamber for tonight," said he. "It is late, and the governor is asleep. Tomorrow, perhaps, he may change you. In the meantime there is bread, water, and fresh straw, and that is all a prisoner can wish for. Good night." And before Dance could open his mouth, before he had noticed where the jailer placed his bread or the water, before he had glanced towards the corner where the straw was, the jailer disappeared, taking with him the lamp and closing the door, leaving stamped upon the prisoner's mind the dim reflection of the dripping walls of his dungeon. Dance was alone in darkness, and in silence, cold as the shadows, that he felt breathe on his burning forehead. With the first dawn of day the jailer returned, with orders to leave Dance where he was. He found the prisoner in the same position, as if fixed there, his eyes swollen with weeping. He had passed the night standing, and without sleep. The jailer advanced. Dance appeared not to perceive him. He touched him on the shoulder. Edmund started. "Have you not slept?" said the jailer. "I do not know," replied Dance. The jailer stared. "Are you hungry?" continued he. "I do not know. Do you wish for anything?" "I wish to see the governor." The jailer shrugged his shoulders and left the chamber. Dance followed him with his eyes and stretched forth his hands towards the open door, but the door closed. All his emotion then burst forth. He cast himself on the ground, weeping bitterly, and asking himself what crime he had committed that he was thus punished. The day passed thus. He scarcely tasted food, but walked round and round the cell like a wild beast in its cage. One thought in particular tormented him, namely, that during his journey here he had sat so still, while he may, a dozen times, have plunged into the sea, and, thanks to his powers of swimming, for which he was famous, have gained the shore, concealed himself until the arrival of a Genoese or Spanish vessel, escaped to Spain or Italy, where Merkz and his father could have joined him. He had no fears as to how he should live. Good seamen are welcome everywhere. He spoke Italian like a Tuscan, and Spanish like a Castilian. He would have been free, and happy with Merkz and his father, while he was now confined in the Ch. that impregnable fortress, ignorant of the future destiny of his father and Merkz, and all this because he had trusted to Villefort's promise. The thought was maddening, and Dance threw himself furiously down on his straw. The next morning at the same hour, the jailer came again. "Well," said the jailer, "are you more reasonable today?" Dance made no reply. "Come, cheer up. Is there anything that I can do for you?" "I wish to see the governor." "I have already told you it was impossible." "Why so?" "Because it is against prison rules, and prisoners must not evening ask for it." "What is allowed, then?" "Better fare, if you pay for it, books and leave to walk about." "I do not want books. I am satisfied with my food, and do not care to walk about, but I wish to see the governor. If you worry me by repeating the same thing, I will not bring you any more to eat." "Well, then," said Edmund, "if you do not, I shall die of hunger, that is all." The jailer saw by his tone he would be happy to die, and as every prisoner is worth 10 sous a day to his jailer, he replied in a more subdued tone, "What you ask is impossible, but if you are very well behaved you will be allowed to walk about, and some day you will meet the governor, and if he chooses to reply, that is his affair." "But," asked Dance, "how long shall I have to wait?" "Ah, a month, 6 months, a year. It is too long a time. I wish to see him at once." "Ah," said the jailer, "do not always brood over what is impossible, or you will be mad in a fortnight." "You think so?" "Yes, we have an instance here. It was by always offering 1,000,000 of francs to the governor for his liberty that an abbe became mad, who was in this chamber before you." "How long has he left it?" 2 years. "Was he liberated then?" "No, he was put in a dungeon." "Listen," said Dance. "I am not an abbe. I am not mad. Perhaps I shall be, but at present, unfortunately, I am not. I will make you another offer." "What is that?" "I do not offer you 1,000,000, because I have it not, but I will give you 100 crowns if, the first time you go to Marseille, you will seek out a young girl named Mertz at the Catalans, and give her 2 lines from me. If I took them, and were detected, I should lose my place, which is worth 2,000 francs a year, so that I should be a great fool to run such a risk for 300. "Well," said Dance, "mark this. If you refuse at least to tell Mertz I am here, I will some day hide myself behind the door, and when you enter I will dash out your brains with this stool." "Threats!" cried the jailer, retreating and putting himself on the defensive. "You are certainly going mad. The abbe began like you, and in 3 days you will be like him, mad enough to tie up, but, fortunately, there are dungeons here." Dance whirled the stool round his head. All right," said the jailer, "all right, since you will have it so. I will send word to the governor." "Very well," returned Dance, dropping the stool and sitting on it as if he were in reality mad. The jailer went out and returned in an instant with a corporal and 4 soldiers. "By the governor's orders," said he, "conduct the prisoner to the tier beneath." "To the dungeon, then," said the corporal. "Yes, we must put the madman with the madman." The soldiers seized Dance, who followed passively. He descended 15 steps, and the door of a dungeon was opened, and he was thrust in. The door closed, and Dance advanced with outstretched hands until he touched the wall. He then sat down in the corner until his eyes became accustomed to the darkness. Chapter 9. The evening of the betrothal. Villefort had, as we have said, hastened back to Madame de Saint-Emran's in the Place du Grand Cours, and on entering the house found that the guests whom he had left at table were taking coffee in the salon. René was, with all the rest of the company, anxiously awaiting him, and his entrance was followed by a general exclamation. "Well, decapitator, guardian of the state, royalist, Brutus, what is the matter?" Said one. "Speak out. Are we threatened with a fresh reign of terror?" Asked another. "Has the Corsican ogre broken loose?" Cried a third. "Marquise," said Villefort, approaching his future mother-in-law, "I request your pardon for thus leaving you. Will the Marquis honor me by a few moments' private conversation?" "Ah, it is really a serious matter, then?" asked the Marquis, remarking the cloud on Villefort's brow. "So serious that I must take leave of you for a few days. So," added he, turning to René, "judge for yourself if it be not important." "You are going to leave us?" cried René, unable to hide her emotion at this unexpected announcement. "Alas," returned Villefort, "I must." "Where, Then, are you going? Asked the Marquise. That, madam, is an official secret, but if you have any commissions for Paris, a friend of mine is going there tonight and will with pleasure undertake them. The guests looked at each other. You wish to speak to me alone? Said the Marquis. Yes, let us go to the library, please. The Marquis took his arm, and they left the salon. Well, asked he, as soon as they were by themselves, tell me what it is. An affair of the greatest importance that demands my immediate presence in Paris. Now, excuse the indiscretion, Marquis, but have you any landed property? All my fortune is in the funds, 700,000 or 800,000 francs. Then sell out, Marquis, or you will lose it all. But how can I sell out here? You have a broker, have you not? Yes. Then give me a letter to him, and tell him to sell out without an instant's delay. Perhaps evening now I shall arrive too late. The deuce you say, replied the Marquis. Let us lose no time. Then, and, sitting down, he wrote a letter to his broker, ordering him to sell out at the market price. Now, then, said Villefort, placing the letter in his pocket-book, I must have another. To whom? To the king. To the king? Yes. I dare not write to His Majesty. I do not ask you to write to His Majesty, but ask M. de Salvia to do so. I want a letter that will enable me to reach the king's presence without all the formalities of demanding an audience that would occasion a loss of precious time. But address yourself to the keeper of the seals. He has the right of entry at the Tuileries, and can procure you audience at any hour of the day or night. Doubtless, but there is no occasion to divide the honors of my discovery with him. The keeper would leave me in the background and take all the glory to himself. I tell you, Marquis, my fortune is made if I only reach the Tuileries the first, for the king will not forget the service I do him. In that case go and get ready. I will call Salvia and make him write the letter. Be as quick as possible. I must be on the road in a quarter of an hour. Tell your coachman to stop at the door. You will present my excuses to the Marquise and Mademoiselle Renée, whom I leave on such a day with great regret. You will find them both here, and can make your farewells in person. 1,000 thanks, and now for the letter. The Marquis rang. A servant entered. Say to the Comte de Salvia that I would like to see him. Now, then, go, said the Marquis. I shall be gone only a few moments. Villefort hastily quitted the apartment, but reflecting that the sight of the deputy procureur running through the streets would be enough to throw the whole city into confusion, he resumed his ordinary pace. At his door he perceived a figure in the shadow that seemed to wait for him. It was Mertz, who, hearing no news of her lover, had come unobserved to inquire after him. As Villefort drew near, she advanced and stood before him. Dance had spoken of Mertz, and Villefort instantly recognized her. Her beauty and high bearing surprised him, and when she had inquired what had become of her lover, it seemed to him that she was the judge, and he the accused. The young man you speak of, said Villefort abruptly, is a great criminal, and I can do nothing for him, mademoiselle. Mertz burst into tears, and as Villefort strove to pass her, again addressed him. But, at least, tell me where he is, that I may know whether he is alive or dead, said she. I do not know. He is no longer in my hands, replied Villefort. And desirous of putting an end to the interview, he pushed by her, and closed the door, as if to exclude the pain he felt. But remorse is not thus banished. Like Virgil's wounded hero, he carried the arrow in his wound, and, arrived at the salon, Villefort uttered a sigh that was almost a sob, and sank into a chair. Then the first pangs of an unending torture seized upon his heart. The man he sacrificed to his ambition, that innocent victim immolated on the altar of his father's faults, appeared to him pale and threatening, leading his affianced bride by the hand, and bringing with him remorse, not such as the ancients figured, furious and terrible, but that slow and consuming agony whose pangs are intensified from hour to hour up to the very moment of death. Then he had a moment's hesitation. He had frequently called for capital punishment on criminals, and owing to his irresistible eloquence they had been condemned, and yet the slightest shadow of remorse had never clouded Villefort's brow, because they were guilty, At least, he believed so, but here was an innocent man whose happiness he had destroyed. In this case he was not the judge, but the executioner. As he thus reflected, he felt the sensation we have described, and which had hitherto been unknown to him, arise in his bosom, and fill him with vague apprehensions. It is thus that a wounded man trembles instinctively at the approach of the finger to his wound until it be healed. But Villefort's was one of those that never close, or if they do, only close to reopen more agonizing than ever. If at this moment the sweet voice of Renée had sounded in his ears pleading for mercy, or the fair Mertz had entered and said, "In the name of God, I conjure you to restore me my affianced husband," his cold and trembling hands would have signed his release, but no voice broke the stillness of the chamber, and the door was opened only by Villefort's valet, who came to tell him that the traveling carriage was in readiness. Villefort rose, or rather sprang, from his chair, hastily opened one of the drawers of his desk, emptied all the gold it contained into his pocket, stood motionless an instant, his hand pressed to his head, muttered a few inarticulate sounds, and then, perceiving that his servant had placed his cloak on his shoulders, he sprang into the carriage, ordering the postilions to drive to M. de Saint-Amand's. The hapless dance was doomed. As the Marquis had promised, Villefort found the Marquise and Renée in waiting. He started when he saw Renée, for he fancied she was again about to plead for dance. Alas, her emotions were wholly personal. She was thinking only of Villefort's departure. She loved Villefort, and he left her at the moment he was about to become her husband. Villefort knew not when he should return, and Renée, far from pleading for dance, hated the man whose crime separated her from her lover. Meanwhile, what of Mertz? She had met Fernand at the corner of the Rue de la Loge. She had returned to the Catalans, and had despairingly cast herself on her couch. Fernand, kneeling by her side, took her hand and covered it with kisses that Mertz did not even feel. She passed the night thus. The lamp went out for want of oil, but she paid no heed to the darkness, and dawn came, but she knew not that it was day. Grief had made her blind to all but one object, that was Edmond. "Ah, you are there," said she, at length, turning towards Fernand. "I have not quitted you since yesterday," returned Fernand sorrowfully. Morel had not readily given up the fight. He had learned that Dance had been taken to prison, and he had gone to all his friends and the influential persons of the city, but the report was already in circulation that Dance was arrested as a Bonapartist agent, and as the most sanguine looked upon any attempt of Napoleon to remount the throne as impossible, he met with nothing but refusal, and had returned home in despair, declaring that the matter was serious and that nothing more could be done. Caedros was equally restless and uneasy, but instead of seeking, like Morel, to aid Dance, he had shut himself up with 2 bottles of black currant brandy, in the hope of drowning reflection. But he did not succeed, and became too intoxicated to fetch any more drink, and yet not so intoxicated as to forget what had happened. With his elbows on the table he sat between the 2 empty bottles, while spectres danced in the light of the unsnuffed candle, spectres such as Hoffmann strews over his punch-drenched pages, like black, fantastic dust. Danglars alone was content and joyous. He had got rid of an enemy and made his own situation on the Pharaon secure. Danglars was one of those men born with a pen behind the ear and an inkstand in place of a heart. Everything with him was multiplication or subtraction. The life of a man was to him of far less value than a numeral, especially when, by taking it away, he could increase the sum total of his own desires. He went to bed at his usual hour, and slept in peace. Villefort, after having received M. de Salvia's letter, embraced Renée, kissed the Marquise's hand, and shaken that of the Marquis, started for Paris along the Aix road. Old Dance was dying with anxiety to know what had become of Edmond.